Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Weight of Memory. The mahogany desk gleamed under the soft lighting of Harvey Stout's corner office on the 42nd floor of Stout Dynamics Tower. At 38, he commanded one of the fastest-growing tech companies in Silicon Valley, his empire built from nothing but determination and an unshakable belief in his own worth. The irony of his company's name wasn't lost on him, taking the family surname that had once been used to shame him. Harvey's fingers drummed against his leather chair as he reviewed quarterly reports. Revenue was up 40%, and their new AI-driven logistics platform had just secured contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco sprawled beneath him like a conquered territory. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Stout, your 4 o'clock is here. Send him in, Marcus." Clark Fisher, his chief operating officer and closest friend since MIT, entered with his characteristic easy grin. At 6'3", with prematurely silver hair, Clark had the kind of presence that made boardrooms pay attention. He'd been with Harvey since the beginning, when they'd worked 18-hour days in a cramped garage. "The Patterson deal is signed," Clark announced, dropping into the chair across from Harvey's desk. "That's $12 million in guaranteed revenue over the next 3 years. Harvey nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. It always drifted this time of year, late October, when the autumn air carried memories he'd rather forget. "You're thinking about them again," Clark observed, knowing his friend better than anyone. "It's been 15 years, Harv. You built something incredible. You won." Harvey's jaw tightened. "Winning isn't about success, Clark. It's about justice." Clark leaned forward. "You were 23, broke and homeless. Now you're worth $300 million and growing. If that's not justice, what is?" Harvey stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. At 23, he'd been a different person, trusting, naive, believing that blood meant something. The memory hit him like a physical blow, standing in his parents' living room in their modest Sacramento home, watching his father Charles hand over the inheritance documentation to his golden boy, brother Billy. "Harvey doesn't have the business sense," his father had said, not even looking at him. "Billy's got real plans. You just wasted on your computer fantasies." But it was his mother Patricia's words that had cut deepest. "He's our real son. We should have aborted you before birth." The slap that followed had stung less than the finality in her voice. Harvey had been adopted at 3 months old, something he discovered accidentally at 16 when he needed his birth certificate for a driver's license. His parents had never told him, but explained why Billy, 2 years younger and born to them naturally, had always been the favorite. "The inheritance was rightfully mine," Harvey said quietly. "Grandpa Joe left it to me specifically because he saw something in me that they couldn't." Clark joined him at the window. "Your grandfather would be proud of what you built without their money. $150,000 doesn't sound like much now, but it could have changed everything back then. Instead, Billy used it to open his first restaurant." Harvey's voice carried no emotion, but Clark could see the tension in his shoulders. The irony was exquisite. Billy had used Harvey's inheritance to start Stout Family Kitchens, eventually expanding to 47 locations across California and Nevada. Meanwhile, Harvey had scraped together enough money washing dishes and coding freelance websites to eventually launch his first app from a studio apartment in Oakland. "Any word from your private investigator?" Clark asked. Harvey returned to his desk and opened a locked drawer, retrieving a thick manila folder. "Trevor McKinney sent his final report yesterday. Billy's restaurants are hemorrhaging money. Bad management, oversaturation in failing markets, and some questionable real estate investments. They've got maybe 6 months before bankruptcy. And your parents? Leveraged everything to help him expand last year. Their house, their retirement savings, everything." Harvey opened the folder, revealing financial documents, photographs, and detailed reports. "They're about to lose it all." Clark studied his friend's expression. Harvey had the kind of face that could be warm and charming in boardroom presentations, but could turn ice cold when crossed. Right now, it was unreadable. "What are you thinking?" Harvey closed the folder and locked it away. I'm thinking that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. They threw away their only son for someone they thought was golden. Now their golden boy is about to drag them down with him. Harvey, I built this company from nothing, Clark. Every rejection letter, every failed pitch, every night sleeping in my car because I couldn't afford rent, it all led to this moment. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their approval. But justice. Harvey's eyes hardened. Justice is something else entirely. As the sun set over the Bay Area, casting long shadows across his office, Harvey Stout began to plan. Not for expansion or new products or market dominance, but for something far more personal. 15 years ago, his family had written him off as worthless. Soon, they would learn the true cost of that decision. Chapter 2. The Golden Sun's Fall. Billy Stout sat in his empty restaurant at 2 in the morning, surrounded by towers of unpaid invoices and final notices. At 36, he'd lost the boyish charm that had once made him his parents' pride and joy. His face was puffy from stress and too much drinking. His clothes rumpled from another sleepless night trying to save his dying empire. Stout Family Kitchens had once been his pride, a chain of upscale casual dining restaurants that promised authentic family recipes passed down through generations. The marketing had been brilliant, the food decent, and for nearly a decade, success had seemed inevitable. But Billy had never been good with numbers or long-term planning. Those skills belonged to the brother he'd helped destroy. He remembered Harvey differently than their parents did. While Charles and Patricia saw Harvey as the awkward, antisocial adoptee who spent too much time with computers, Billy remembered someone who'd helped him with homework, taught him how to ride a bike, and once spent his entire summer job savings to buy Billy a guitar for his 14th birthday. The guilt had been eating at him for years, but it was easier to drown it in expansion plans and his parents' constant praise. "You're building something real," his father would say. "Not like your brother with his silly apps and websites." Now, Billy stared at the foreclosure notice for the flagship location. 3 months behind on rent, suppliers demanding payment up front, and employees quitting daily for jobs that actually paid on time. The borrowed money, Harvey's inheritance money, was long gone, swallowed by poor decisions and an economy that had shifted away from mid-tier dining. His phone buzzed. A text from his father. "Any word from the investors?" Billy had been lying to his parents for months, telling them he was in talks with venture capitalists and angel investors. In reality, no one wanted to touch a failing restaurant chain with 47 locations bleeding cash in secondary markets. The worst part was knowing Harvey had been right about everything. During those few family dinners they'd all attended in their early 20s before the final falling out, Harvey had warned him about overexpansion, about the risks of borrowed growth, about building sustainable business models. Billy had dismissed it as jealousy. "You don't understand the restaurant business," Billy had said smugly. "This isn't some tech startup that exists in the cloud." Harvey had just nodded, that same unreadable expression he'd worn since childhood when faced with their parents' favoritism. Billy's laptop chimed with an email notification. Another creditor, another demand for payment. But this one caught his attention. The sender was someone named Trevor McKinney from McKinney Investigations. Subject, business inquiry, potential investment opportunity. Billy opened it with shaking hands. Asterisk, Mr. Stout. I represent a client interested in distressed restaurant properties. We've been monitoring Stout Family Kitchens and believe there might be an opportunity for a mutually beneficial arrangement. Would you be available for a phone call tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Best regards, Trevor McKinney, asterisk. Billy's heart raced. This could be it, the miracle he'd been praying for. He quickly typed a response confirming the call, then immediately dialed his parents. "Dad, I think I found someone. An investor interested in the restaurants." Charles Stout's voice crackled through the phone from the modest Sacramento home that was currently in pre-foreclosure. "Thank God, son. Your mother and I, we can't lose the house, Billy. It's all we have left." "I know, Dad. I'll fix this. I promise." But even as Billy said the words, part of him wondered if this was just another dead end. He'd gotten 3 similar emails over the past month, all from people who'd ultimately wanted to buy his assets for pennies on the dollar. Still, he had to try. His parents had sacrificed everything for him. Their retirement, their financial security, their relationship with Harvey. The least he could do was fight until the very end. As Billy locked up the empty restaurant and walked to his car, a BMW he could no longer afford, he thought about the brother he'd helped his parents destroy. Harvey had started with nothing and built an empire. Meanwhile, Billy had started with everything and was losing it all. The irony wasn't lost on him, but it was far too late for apologies. Miles away, in his penthouse apartment overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, Harvey Stout set down his phone after confirming the meeting through Trevor McKinney. Phase 1 of his plan was already in motion. Tomorrow, Billy would learn that some debts could never be repaid. Chapter 3. The Reunion. The elevator climbed silently toward the executive floors of Stout Dynamics Tower as Charles and Patricia Stout stood rigidly side by side. Both in their late 60s, they looked older than their years. Charles with his hunched shoulders and trembling hands. Patricia with deep worry lines etched around eyes that had once sparkled with confidence. They'd driven down from Sacramento in their 15-year-old Honda Civic, the same car they'd kept running with duct tape and prayers since losing their newer vehicles to creditors. The 42-story tower rising above them represented a world they'd never imagined their adopted son could inhabit. "Are you sure about this?" Patricia whispered, clutching her worn purse. Charles straightened his cheap suit jacket, the only one he owned that wasn't completely threadbare. "We don't have a choice. Billy says this Harvey Stout might be willing to buy the restaurants as a package deal. It's our only shot at saving the house." Neither of them had made the connection. Stout was a common enough name, and the idea that their discarded son could have built something this magnificent was simply incomprehensible to them. The elevator doors opened onto a gleaming reception area where Marcus Wright, Harvey's assistant, greeted them with professional courtesy. At 28, Marcus was everything Harvey looked for in employees: brilliant, loyal, and utterly discreet. He'd been briefed on today's visitors and their significance. "Mr. and Mrs. Stout, Mr. Harvey will see you now." They followed Marcus through corridors lined with modern art and floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the bay. Employees moved with purpose and energy, the kind of environment that radiated success and innovation. The double doors to Harvey's office opened, and Patricia gasped. Harvey rose from behind his desk, 38 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than his parents' monthly Social Security income. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his face lean and confident, bearing only the faintest resemblance to the broken young man they'd cast out 15 years ago. For a moment, nobody spoke. The recognition dawned slowly on Charles's face, then Patricia's. Their mouths opened in shock, then quickly snapped shut as the full implications hit them. "Hello, Mom. Dad." Harvey's voice was calm, professional, with just the slightest emphasis on the familial terms. "Please have a seat." Charles remained frozen, but Patricia found her voice first. "Harvey? But we came here to meet with Harvey Stout about Billy's restaurants. And here I am." Harvey gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "You wanted to discuss a potential investment in Stout Family Kitchens. I'm all ears." They sat slowly, both looking like they'd seen a ghost. Harvey returned to his chair and pulled out the folder he'd shown Clark the day before. "I've done my due diligence on your family's business ventures," Harvey continued, opening the folder with deliberate precision. 47 locations, currently operating at a net loss of approximately $1.2 million per month. Outstanding debts totaling $8.7 million. And from what I understand, you've personally guaranteed many of these loans using your home as collateral. Charles's face had gone pale. How did I know?" Harvey smiled, and it wasn't kind. "I make it my business to know about interesting investment opportunities. Though I have to say, the irony here is remarkable." Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on the pleading tone she'd once used when Billy got in trouble at school. "Harvey, if you're willing to help Billy, we can work something out. We know you're successful now." "Successful?" Harvey repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. "Yes, I suppose I am. Built from nothing, of course. No family money to jumpstart things. No inheritance from Grandpa Joe to cushion the failures. The mention of the inheritance made both parents flinch. Charles cleared his throat. That was a long time ago. We did what we thought was best for the family. For the family, Harvey echoed. Tell me, how has the family investment worked out? Billy's restaurants are failing. Your home is in foreclosure, and you're sitting in my office begging for help from the son you disowned. He leaned back in his chair. I'd say your judgment regarding family investments was somewhat flawed. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. We made mistakes, Harvey. We know that now. But Billy, he's your brother. Surely you wouldn't let family suffer when you have the means to help. The word family hung in the air like a curse. Harvey stood and walked to the window, his back to them. Family, he said softly. I remember being 23 and believing in that word. I remember thinking that adoption meant I belonged somewhere, that love could overcome biology. He turned around, and his eyes were steel. Do you remember what you said to me that day, Patricia? Patricia's hands shook as she gripped her purse tighter. We were emotional, stressed about money. You said I wasn't your real son. You said you should have aborted me before birth. Harvey's voice remained level, almost conversational. Those are very specific words. Patricia, they tend to stick with a person. Charles tried to intervene. Harvey, we were wrong. We can see that now. You've accomplished incredible things. But Billy, he's struggling. The whole family is struggling. The whole family. Harvey returned to his desk and pressed a button on his intercom. Marcus, could you please escort Mr. and Mrs. Stout to the lobby? They seem to be lost. Wait. Patricia stood abruptly. Please, Harvey. We're desperate. The bank is going to foreclose next month. We'll lose everything. Harvey looked at them for a long moment. Two people who'd once held absolute power over his world, now reduced to begging in his office. The moment should have felt triumphant, but instead it felt hollow. You're right about one thing, Harvey said finally. You will lose everything, but not because I won't help you. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out another folder. You'll lose everything because choices have consequences and you're finally experiencing yours. Marcus appeared at the door with 2 security guards. Harvey nodded toward his parents. Marcus, please make sure Mr. and Mrs. Stout find their way out safely, and mark them in the system as visitors who are not to be admitted again without my express permission. As the security guards approached, Charles made one last desperate attempt. Harvey, please. We know we hurt you, but we're your parents. We raised you. Harvey smiled then. It was the coldest expression his parents had ever seen. No, he said quietly. You destroyed me. I raised myself. As they were escorted out, Harvey could hear Patricia sobbing in the corridor. He felt nothing at the sound. Not satisfaction, not guilt, nothing at all. That part of him had died 15 years ago on a cold October day in Sacramento. Clark remained in his chair, watching his friend carefully. That was brutal, even for you. That was mercy, Harvey corrected. Brutal comes next. Through his window, Harvey watched his parents emerge onto the sidewalk below, 2 small figures dwarfed by the tower he'd built. They looked lost, broken, exactly as he'd once looked standing in their driveway with a single suitcase and nowhere to go. The difference was that Harvey had learned to turn pain into power. They were about to learn what it felt like when power turned against them. Chapter 4. The Investigation. 2 weeks after his parents' visit, Harvey sat in his private conference room with a team of 5 people who specialized in information that most companies would never need. Trevor McKinney, the private investigator who'd been tracking the Stout family finances for months, spread documents across the polished table like a general planning a campaign. The situation is worse than we initially thought, Trevor began, his gravelly voice the product of too many years spent in smoky bars gathering intelligence. At 52, he was Harvey's go-to source for information that existed in shadows and gray areas. Billy's borrowed against properties he doesn't technically own, used fake financial statements to secure loans, and there's evidence he's been skimming from employee payroll taxes. Harvey examined photographs of Billy entering various bank offices, always looking desperate. Elaborate on the tax situation. Federal and state agencies are already investigating. Billy thought he could pay it back before anyone noticed, but he's short about $600,000. That's felony territory. Aaron Griffith, Harvey's head of legal affairs, looked up from his tablet. The payroll tax issue gives us leverage, but we need to be careful about how we use it. There's more, Trevor continued. I've been monitoring communications between Billy and your parents. They're planning to approach you directly, in person. Apparently, Patricia convinced Charles that you still have feelings for them somewhere deep down. Clark shook his head. The delusion is impressive. It gets better, Trevor said, pulling out another file. Eugene Winter, their current accountant, has been advising them to file bankruptcy and start fresh. But there's a complication. They owe money to some very unpleasant people. Harvey raised an eyebrow. Explain. Billy borrowed $200,000 from Kurt Jones, who runs a loan operation that doesn't advertise in newspapers, if you catch my meaning. Jones isn't the type to write off bad debt as a loss for tax purposes. The room fell silent. Mel James, Harvey's head of security and a former Navy SEAL, spoke up. Jones has a reputation. People who default on his loans tend to have accidents. How much time do they have? Harvey asked. Jones gave them until Thanksgiving to pay in full, plus interest, Trevor replied. That's about 5 weeks. Harvey steepled his fingers, processing this new information. His original plan had been simple. Watch his family's empire crumble while he remained safely above the fray. But the involvement of Kurt Jones changed the dynamics significantly. What do we know about Jones's operation? Mel consulted his own notes. Jones runs his business through 3 shell companies, all legitimate on paper. He's smart, careful, and has never been successfully prosecuted for anything. But his collection methods are thorough. Harvey stood and walked to the conference room's window wall. Below, the city hummed with life and commerce, millions of people pursuing their own ambitions and dreams. Somewhere out there, his parents were probably lying awake worrying about their future, just as he'd once done. Trevor, I want detailed financial records on Jones's operation. Everything. How he moves money, who he works with, what properties he owns. That's dangerous territory, Harvey, Aaron warned. Jones isn't someone you want to cross accidentally. I'm not planning to cross him, Harvey said. I'm planning to use him. Clark leaned forward. What are you thinking? Harvey turned back to the group. Billy borrowed money from Jones using fake financial statements. That makes it fraud. Jones doesn't know he was lied to, which means when Billy inevitably defaults, Jones will assume he was deliberately scammed. You want to accelerate their conflict, Trevor said, understanding immediately. I want to provide Jones with accurate information about his debtor, Harvey corrected. It's really just good business ethics. Mel looked uncomfortable. Harvey, these aren't corporate competitors we're talking about. Jones's people have been known to put folks in hospitals. Billy made his choices, Harvey said coldly. He chose to defraud federal agencies. He chose to lie to dangerous people. I'm simply ensuring that truth comes to light. Aaron was taking notes rapidly. We'll need to be very careful about how information reaches Jones. Any connection to us could create legal exposure. Leave that to me, Trevor said. I know someone who knows someone. Jones will get the real numbers on Billy's finances, and it'll look like routine due diligence he should have done before making the loan. Harvey returned to his seat. What about employee protections for the restaurant staff? This surprised everyone. Clark especially looked confused. You're worried about Billy's employees? I'm worried about innocent people losing their jobs because of Billy's incompetence, Harvey clarified. Most of those people are hourly workers with families. They didn't choose to get involved in Billy's mess. It was typical Harvey, ruthless toward those who'd wronged him, but protective of bystanders caught in the crossfire. He'd built stout dynamics with the same philosophy, treating employees like family while crushing competitors without mercy. I can set up an employment transition fund, Aaron offered. Anonymous donations to help restaurant workers find new positions. Do it, Harvey agreed. Now, what about my parents' house? Trevor consulted another file. They've got about 6 weeks before the bank finalizes foreclosure proceedings. The mortgage company is Pacific Coast Financial, a mid-sized operation out of Los Angeles. Harvey smiled for the first time during the meeting. Pacific Coast Financial. I'm familiar with them. We handle their IT infrastructure through our subsidiary. The implications of this hung in the air. Clark grinned. You're thinking of buying the debt. I'm thinking of acquiring distressed assets at fair market value, Harvey said. It's just good business. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to their various assignments, Harvey remained in the conference room alone. Through the glass walls, he could see his employees working late, building something meaningful and lasting. Every person in this building had been chosen for their skills, dedication, and integrity. They were his real family now. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Please call me. We need to talk. Billy." Harvey deleted the message without reading it twice. Some conversations were 15 years too late. Chapter 5. The Trap is Set. Billy Stout paced outside the downtown Sacramento office building, checking his watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The meeting with Trevor McKinney's mysterious client was scheduled for 3 p.m., and Billy had arrived 30 minutes early out of sheer desperation. His phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from creditors, but one call had made his blood run cold. Kurt Jones himself had called to check in on the loan repayment schedule. Jones's voice had been friendly, almost grandfatherly, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been openly threatening. "Billy, my boy," Jones had said, "I hope you're making progress on our little arrangement. Thanksgiving is coming up fast, and I'd hate for family troubles to interfere with the holiday spirit." Now, standing outside the office building, Billy felt the weight of his family's future pressing down on him like a physical force. The meeting with McKinney's client was their last hope. At exactly 3 p.m., Billy was escorted to a conference room where Trevor McKinney waited with a man introduced only as Mr. Coleman. Coleman was thin, well-dressed, and spoke with the precise diction of someone comfortable with large financial transactions. "Mr. Stout," Coleman began, "I represent interests that specialize in acquiring undervalued restaurant properties in distressed situations. We've been watching Stout Family Kitchens for some time." Billy's heart jumped. "You're interested in buying?" "Potentially. But first, we need complete transparency about your financial situation. Our due diligence has revealed some concerning discrepancies." Coleman slid a folder across the table. Billy opened it to find detailed financial records, far more detailed than anything he'd provided to any previous potential investor. "How did you get these numbers?" "We have our sources," Coleman replied smoothly. "The question is whether these represent the complete picture of your liabilities." Billy studied the documents. They were accurate, almost frighteningly so. Someone had access to information that should have been private. "There are some additional concerns," Coleman continued. "Federal tax obligations, for instance, and certain private loans that weren't disclosed in your initial business summary." The mention of private loans made Billy's stomach drop. Those are separate obligations. "Mr. Stout, we can't acquire properties with undisclosed liens or debts. If we're going to move forward, we need complete honesty about all obligations, including any arrangements with private lenders like Kurt Jones." Billy's face went white. "How could they possibly know about Jones?" "I see that name means something to you," Coleman observed. "Mr. McKinney, perhaps you could explain our discovery process." Trevor leaned forward. "Our research indicates you borrowed $200,000 from Jones using financial statements that didn't accurately reflect your company's position. That's a serious legal exposure for any potential buyer." Billy felt trapped. If he admitted to the Jones loan and the false statements, he'd be confessing to fraud. If he denied it, these people clearly had enough information to walk away. What are you suggesting?" Coleman opened his briefcase and removed a different set of documents. "We're prepared to make an offer, but it requires full disclosure and cooperation. We'll purchase all 47 restaurant properties for $2.2 million, enough to cover your legitimate business debts and provide a small cushion for transition." Billy's heart sank. The properties were worth at least $12 million in a normal market, but $2.2 million was better than bankruptcy. However, Coleman continued, "This offer requires immediate acceptance and complete honesty about all financial obligations. We cannot protect you from private arrangements that were entered into fraudulently." "What does that mean?" Trevor answered, "It means Kurt Jones is going to learn the truth about your financial statements, whether this deal goes through or not. Someone's already compiled the real numbers, and word has a way of getting around in certain circles." Billy realized he was being maneuvered into an impossible position. Accept the lowball offer and lose everything while still facing Jones's wrath over the false financial statements, or reject it and face both bankruptcy and Jones's collection methods. I need time to think. Time is something you don't have, Coleman interrupted. This offer expires at close of business today. After that, we move on to other opportunities. Billy called his parents from the parking lot, his hands shaking as he dialed. They're offering $2.2 million for everything, he told his father. That's not enough to save the house and cover Billy's debts, Charles said, his voice hollow with defeat. Dad, there's something else. They know about the Kurt Jones loan, and they know about the financial statements I used to get it. A long silence. Finally, Charles spoke. What are you saying? I'm saying Jones is going to find out I lied to him about the business numbers. And when he does, Billy couldn't finish the sentence. Meanwhile, across town in his penthouse, Harvey received updates from his team with the satisfaction of a chess master watching his opponent discover they were in checkmate. The offer to Billy was real. $2.2 million would indeed cover the legitimate business debts. But Harvey's acquisition of those restaurant properties was just the opening move in a larger game. Kurt Jones would receive an anonymous package tomorrow containing Billy's real financial records, along with copies of the false statements used to secure the loan. Jones would realize he'd been defrauded, and his response would be swift and unforgiving. Meanwhile, Pacific Coast Financial, the company holding his parents' mortgage, would receive an offer to purchase their distressed debt portfolio at above-market rates. An offer they couldn't refuse, especially when it came from a shell company controlled by Stout Dynamics. By Thanksgiving, Harvey would own his childhood home, Billy would be facing federal charges and Kurt Jones's wrath, and his parents would understand exactly what it felt like to lose everything. The best part was that every move was perfectly legal. Harvey wasn't breaking any laws. He was simply allowing the consequences of his family's choices to unfold naturally. Justice, Harvey had learned, didn't require vengeance. It simply required patience and precise timing. As the sun set over San Francisco, Harvey poured himself a glass of 25-year-old scotch and toasted the empty room. To family, he said quietly, and drained the glass. Chapter 6, The News Titans. Kurt Jones received the anonymous package on a Wednesday morning that started like any other. At 63, Jones had been in the private lending business for over 30 years, and he prided himself on accurate risk assessment. He didn't make loans to people who couldn't pay them back, and he certainly didn't appreciate being lied to. The package contained no return address, just a manila envelope with his name typed on a plain white label. Inside, he found financial documents, bank statements, and tax records that told a very different story than the one Billy Stout had presented 6 months earlier. Jones spread the documents across his desk in his modest Stockton office. According to Billy's original application, Stout Family Kitchens had been generating steady profits with minor seasonal fluctuations. The real documents told a different story entirely. Massive losses, defaulted payments, and a business model that had been failing for over 2 years. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. Daryl, it's Kurt. I need you to verify some information for me. Daryl Lee was Jones's most trusted investigator, a former cop who developed a talent for finding information that people preferred to keep hidden. 20 minutes later, Daryl called back with confirmation. Boss, the numbers are real. Billy Stout's been lying through his teeth. The restaurants are bleeding money. He's behind on federal taxes. And word is he's looking to sell everything and disappear. Jones felt the familiar cold anger that had served him well in business. He'd built his reputation on fair dealing and honest assessment of risk. Clients who tried to scam him discovered that the interest on their loans was the least of their problems. What's the family situation? Parents mortgaged their house to help him expand last year. They're facing foreclosure. Stout's got a brother who's apparently some big-shot tech guy, but they haven't spoken in years. Find Billy Stout. Today, while Jones was learning the truth about his loan, Charles and Patricia Stout were discovering their own unpleasant reality. The phone call from Pacific Coast Financial came during their afternoon news program, interrupting their ritual of worrying about bills they couldn't pay. Mrs. Stout, this is Melissa Page from Pacific Coast Financial. I'm calling to inform you that your mortgage debt has been acquired by a private investment firm. You'll be receiving official documentation in the mail but I wanted to reach out personally. Patricia gripped the phone tighter. What does that mean? It means your loan has been sold to new owners. The terms remain the same for now, but you'll be dealing with a different company going forward. After Patricia hung up, she and Charles sat in their living room, the same room where they destroyed their relationship with Harvey 15 years earlier. The furniture was older now, the carpet more worn, but the family photos on the mantel remained the same. Billy's achievements were prominently displayed. His high school graduation, the opening of his first restaurant, various community awards. There were no photos of Harvey after his 22nd birthday. What if this is connected to Harvey? Patricia asked quietly. Charles shook his head. Harvey's in technology, not real estate. Besides, he made it clear he wants nothing to do with us. But Patricia couldn't shake the feeling that their world was closing in around them with too much precision to be coincidental. The timing of everything, the restaurant failures, the mortgage sale, Billy's mysterious investor meetings, felt orchestrated. Meanwhile, Billy was learning that desperation made people careless. The meeting with Coleman hadn't led to a purchase offer, despite promises of follow-up communication. Instead, Billy had spent 2 weeks fielding increasingly aggressive calls from creditors and trying to keep his restaurants operational with skeleton crews. The call from Kurt Jones came while Billy was closing his flagship location for the final time. Billy, my friend, we need to talk. Mr. Jones, I was just going to call you. I'm expecting some money from an investor this week. Billy, stop talking. Jones's voice was soft, almost paternal. I'm at your downtown location. Come alone. Billy drove through Sacramento traffic with his heart hammering against his ribs. Jones's tone had been friendly, but Billy wasn't naive enough to miss the underlying menace. He found Jones sitting in a booth near the window, a small, neat man in his 60s who looked more like a retired accountant than someone who could destroy lives with a phone call. Jones was reading a newspaper and sipping coffee from Billy's restaurant's signature mug. Sit down, son, Jones said without looking up from his paper. Coffee's good. Shame about the business model. Billy slid into the opposite seat. Mr. Jones, if you give me another month. Billy. Jones folded his newspaper precisely and looked up with pale blue eyes that seemed to see everything. Do you remember what I told you when we first met? About honesty being the foundation of all good business relationships. Billy nodded, not trusting his voice. Good, because I've recently learned some interesting things about your financial situation. Things that suggest our initial conversation wasn't entirely truthful. Jones reached into his jacket and pulled out copies of the same documents Harvey's team had been studying for weeks. Billy recognized his real financial statements immediately. Now, I'm a reasonable man, Jones continued. I understand that businesses sometimes exaggerate their prospects to secure funding. But there's a difference between optimism and fraud, wouldn't you agree? Billy's mouth was dry. Mr. Jones, I can explain. The federal government might be interested in your explanations, Billy. Tax evasion, loan fraud, falsifying financial documents. These are serious charges. The kind that carry real prison time. Billy felt the world spinning around him. What do you want? Jones smiled, and it was genuinely warm. I want my money, of course. $200,000, plus the agreed-upon interest. Call it $250 total. I don't have that kind of cash. No, you don't. But I've been thinking about solutions. Jones leaned forward conspiratorially. Your brother Harvey has done quite well for himself, hasn't he? Billy stared at him. Harvey won't help us. We had a falling out years ago. Family disputes can be so unfortunate, Jones said sympathetically. But blood is blood, Billy. And when family members are facing serious legal troubles, the kind that might result in federal prison sentences, sometimes old grudges get set aside. You want me to ask Harvey for the money. I want you to have an honest conversation with your brother about your situation, about what happens to people who defraud federal agencies, about what happens to people who lie to folks like me. Jones stood up, leaving a $5 tip on the table. Families should look out for each other, don't you think? As Jones walked toward the exit, he paused at Billy's shoulder. Oh, and Billy? I'd suggest having that conversation soon. My patience isn't infinite, and neither is the government statute of limitations. After Jones left, Billy sat alone in his failing restaurant, surrounded by the dreams he'd built on borrowed money and broken promises. For the first time since this nightmare began, he found himself thinking about Harvey not as the brother who'd made it big, but as the brother he'd helped destroy. Harvey had warned him about everything that was now happening. The overexpansion, the debt-to-equity ratios, the market saturation. Billy had ignored it all, dismissed Harvey's concerns as jealousy from someone who didn't understand real business. Now Billy understood that Harvey had been trying to save him from exactly this situation. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Harvey wasn't just successful despite their family's treatment of him. Harvey was successful because of it. Every rejection, every dismissal, every cruel word had forged him into someone who could see danger and opportunity with perfect clarity. Billy pulled out his phone and stared at Harvey's contact information, a number he hadn't called in 15 years. His finger hovered over the call button. Somewhere across town, Harvey Stout was having dinner with his executive team, celebrating another successful quarter while his childhood family's world collapsed exactly as he'd planned. The trap was closing, and there was nowhere left to run. Chapter 7: The Prodigal Family. The call came on a rainy Thursday evening while Harvey was reviewing acquisition proposals in his home office. He'd been expecting it for days, had even taken bets with Clark on exactly when his phone would ring. "Harvey." Billy's voice was barely above a whisper. It's Billy." Harvey leaned back in his leather chair, looking out at the storm clouds gathering over the Golden Gate Bridge. "Billy, it's been a while." "Harvey, we need to talk. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm in serious trouble. I heard about the restaurants. Tough market for mid-tier dining these days." Billy was quiet for a moment, probably surprised by Harvey's casual tone. "You heard about the restaurants? I make it my business to know what's happening in local industries. 47 locations seemed aggressive for the market size. Harvey, there's more. I borrowed money from some people, dangerous people, and the financial statements I used to get the loan, they weren't accurate." Harvey allowed himself a small smile. Billy was confessing to fraud without being asked, probably hoping his brother's tech background meant he didn't understand the implications. "That sounds complicated, Billy. I'm facing federal charges for the tax thing, and Kurt Jones, the guy I borrowed from, he found out about the false statements. He wants his money by Thanksgiving, and if I don't pay..." Billy's voice cracked. "Harvey, I think he might hurt Mom and Dad." Now Harvey sat up straighter. This was an interesting development he hadn't anticipated. "Jones threatened our parents?" "Not directly, but he made it clear that family members sometimes suffer for debts they didn't personally incur." "Harvey, I know we treated you terribly. I know we don't deserve your help. But Mom and Dad, they could lose everything. They could get hurt." Harvey was quiet for a long moment, processing this new information. His plan had been to watch his family's financial destruction from a safe distance, but physical threats against his parents complicated things. Despite everything they'd done to him, Harvey found he wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of Charles and Patricia being physically harmed. Financially ruined? Absolutely. Forced to face the consequences of their choices? Without question. But actual violence crossed a line he wasn't prepared to step over. "How much do you owe Jones?" $250 total. "Harvey, I know it's a lot of money." "Billy." Harvey's voice cut through his brother's rambling. "Do you remember what you said to me at Grandpa Joe's funeral?" Billy was quiet. "You said I should be grateful that Mom and Dad kept me around as long as they did. That some families would have just dropped me at a fire station and never looked back." "Harvey, I was 21. I was stupid." "You were honest," Harvey corrected. "Maybe for the first and last time in your life, you were completely honest about how this family saw me." "Please, Harvey, I'll sign over whatever's left of the business to you. I'll work for you, pay you back however you want. Just please don't let them get hurt because of my mistakes." Harvey stood and walked to his window. The storm was intensifying, rain lashing against the glass like tears. In the distance, he could see the lights of Oakland, where he'd once lived in a studio apartment with a leaking roof and a space heater that barely worked. "Meet me tomorrow in my office. 2 p.m. Come alone." "Harvey, thank you. I know you don't owe us anything." "No," Harvey said quietly. "I don't owe you anything. But I owe myself the satisfaction of looking you in the eye when I explain exactly how this is going to work." Harvey hung up without saying goodbye. The next afternoon, Billy stood in the same office where his parents had begged for help 2 weeks earlier. But this time, he wasn't alone with Harvey. Clark Fisher sat in one of the guest chairs, along with 2 people Billy didn't recognize. A woman in an expensive suit who looked like a lawyer, and a man with the bearing of someone accustomed to violence. "Billy, meet my team," Harvey said without standing. "Clark Fisher, my COO, Aaron Griffith, head of legal, and Mel James, head of security." Billy shook hands nervously, aware that he was outnumbered and outclassed in every possible way. "Have a seat," Harvey said. "We have several things to discuss." Aaron opened a folder and slid documents across the table. "These are the purchase agreements for Stout Family Kitchens. All 47 locations, for $2.2 million, as discussed." Billy scanned the documents. Everything seemed straightforward until he reached the employment section. "It says here that all current employees will be retained with improved benefits packages." "That's correct," Harvey said. "Unlike you, I don't believe in punishing innocent people for management failures." The barb hit home, but Billy was too desperate to feel insulted. "What about the Kurt Jones situation?" Mel spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced down actual danger. "Jones has been provided with accurate information about your financial misrepresentations. He's upset." "What does that mean?" Harvey leaned forward. "It means Kurt Jones now understands that you defrauded him using false financial statements. He's demanding immediate payment and considering his legal options." Billy felt the room spinning. "His legal options?" "Jones operates several legitimate businesses," Aaron explained. "He's perfectly within his rights to pursue civil and criminal remedies for loan fraud. The false statements you provided constitute multiple felonies under state and federal law. But if I sign over the restaurants..." "The restaurant sale covers your legitimate business debts," Harvey interrupted. "It doesn't address the federal tax evasion charges you're facing, and it certainly doesn't resolve your fraudulent misrepresentation to Jones." Billy stared at his brother. Harvey's expression was perfectly calm, almost bored, as if they were discussing quarterly projections rather than Billy's imminent destruction. "What do you want from me, Harvey?" "I want you to understand something very important," Harvey said, standing and walking around the desk. 15 years ago, you helped our parents steal my inheritance and cast me out like garbage. You called me worthless, said I'd never amount to anything, laughed when they slapped me for daring to object. Harvey stopped directly in front of Billy's chair, looking down at him like a judge delivering a sentence. "I want you to understand that every moment of suffering you're experiencing right now, every sleepless night, every creditor's call, every moment of terror about Jones's threats, is interest on a debt you incurred 15 years ago." Billy looked up at his brother with growing horror. "You did this. You orchestrated all of this." Harvey smiled for the first time since Billy had arrived. "I didn't orchestrate anything, Billy. I simply allowed the truth to surface. You defrauded federal agencies. That was your choice. You lied to Kurt Jones. That was your choice. You built an unsustainable business model on borrowed money. That was your choice. But you could have warned me. You could have helped. The way you helped me." Harvey's voice turned ice cold. "The way you stood by and watched while our parents destroyed my life." Clark and the others watched in silence as 15 years of suppressed anger finally found its voice. "I begged you, Billy. After they took the inheritance, after they threw me out, I begged you to talk to them. Do you remember what you said?" Billy's face had gone ashen. "You said I should learn to stand on my own 2 feet. You said real men don't need family money to succeed." Harvey leaned down, bringing his face level with Billy's. "Congratulations, brother. You're about to learn exactly what that feels like." The intercom buzzed, and Marcus's voice filled the room. "Mr. Stout, there are federal agents here to see Mr. Billy Stout." Harvey straightened and returned to his desk. "Send them up, Marcus." Billy shot to his feet. "Harvey, please. Don't let them take me. I'll do anything. You'll face the consequences of your actions like an adult," Harvey said calmly. "Just like I had to when our family abandoned me." 3 FBI agents entered the office, led by a woman in her 40s who carried herself with quiet authority. "Billy Stout, I'm Agent Hannah McClain. You're under arrest for federal tax evasion and bank fraud." As they read Billy his rights, and placed him in handcuffs, he looked back at Harvey with a mixture of fear and dawning understanding. "This isn't over," Billy said desperately. "Mom and Dad still need help. Whatever you think I deserve, they don't deserve this." Harvey watched his brother being led away by federal agents, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. They made their choice 15 years ago, Billy. Everything that happens next is just the bill coming due. After the agents left with Billy, Clark looked at his friend with concern. The parents are about to lose their house, and now their son is facing federal charges. "Don't you think that's enough?" Harvey was already opening another folder on his desk. "Clark, do you remember the first time you met my parents?" "Your college graduation. They spent the entire ceremony talking about Billy's restaurant plans while you graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees. Do you remember what my mother said when I told her about my job offer from Google?" Clark's face darkened. "She said it was probably just a pity hire because you were adopted." 15 years of that, Clark. 15 years of being told I was worthless, unwanted, a mistake. Harvey looked up from his documents. They chose their real son over me at every opportunity. Now they get to live with that choice. As the storm raged outside, Harvey Stout continued planning the final phase of his revenge. Billy's arrest was just the beginning. His parents would soon learn that the house they'd mortgaged to help their golden son now belonged to the son they'd thrown away. And unlike their mercy toward him 15 years ago, Harvey's justice would be absolute. Chapter 8. The Final Reckoning. The Sacramento County Courthouse buzzed with activity on the cold December morning when Billy Stout's preliminary hearing was scheduled. Harvey sat in the gallery's back row, wearing dark sunglasses and a simple black suit that made him virtually invisible among the lawyers and family members crowding the benches. He hadn't come to gloat. He'd come to witness the moment when his brother finally understood the full scope of consequences that followed choices made in ignorance and cruelty. Billy looked terrible. 3 weeks in county lockup had stripped away his remaining pretenses. His hair was unwashed. His public defender looked overworked and underpaid, and his orange jumpsuit hung loosely on a frame that had lost considerable weight. Charles and Patricia Stout sat in the front row, holding hands like children afraid of the dark. They'd aged a decade in the past month. The foreclosure proceedings on their house had begun the previous week, and Billy's legal fees were consuming what little savings they had left. Harvey watched as the prosecutor outlined the charges. 18 counts of federal tax evasion, 12 counts of bank fraud, and 6 counts of providing false statements to financial institutions. The evidence was overwhelming. Billy had left a paper trail that even a first-year law student could follow. "Your Honor," Billy's public defender began, "my client was operating under extreme financial pressure and made regrettable decisions in an attempt to save jobs for 47 restaurant locations, employing over 600 people." The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, looked unimpressed. "Mr. Stout, the government is alleging that you systematically defrauded federal agencies and multiple banks over a period of 3 years. These aren't momentary lapses in judgment." As the hearing progressed, Harvey felt someone slide into the seat next to him. Kurt Jones, immaculately dressed despite the early hour, nodded politely. "Mr. Stout," Jones said quietly, "I thought I might find you here." Harvey kept his eyes on the proceedings. "Mr. Jones, I trust your business matters are resolving satisfactorily." "Indeed they are. Young Billy's assets are being liquidated to cover what he legitimately owes. Unfortunately, the fraudulent nature of our initial transaction complicates any hopes of full recovery." "I imagine it does." Jones was quiet for a moment, watching Billy's parents comfort each other in the front row. "It's interesting how families work, isn't it? Some people will sacrifice everything for children who don't deserve it, while casting aside children who do." Harvey glanced at Jones, surprised by the insight. "I did my research on you, Mr. Stout. MIT graduate, Google alumnus, built a $300 million company from scratch, all while your family invested in." Jones gestured toward Billy at the defendant's table. "That family loyalty can be blind," Harvey said. "Indeed. But justice has perfect vision." Jones stood as the judge called a recess. "Your brother will likely serve 18 months to 3 years," depending on cooperation and plea negotiations. Plenty of time for reflection. As Jones left, Harvey remained seated, watching his parents embrace Billy during the brief recess. Even now, facing overwhelming evidence of their golden son's failures and crimes, they stood by him with unwavering support. It was everything Harvey had needed from them 15 years ago and had never received. That evening, Harvey stood on the steps of his childhood home for the first time since his 23rd birthday. The house looked smaller than he remembered, more worn, with a foreclosure notice prominently posted on the front door. Charles answered Harvey's knock, his face cycling through surprise, hope, and resignation in rapid succession. "Harvey, we didn't expect to see you. May I come in?" The living room was exactly as Harvey remembered it, down to the same furniture arrangement and family photos on the mantel. The only difference was the stack of legal documents on the coffee table and the tangible weight of desperation hanging in the air. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, moving slowly like someone recovering from a long illness. "Harvey, what are you doing here?" Harvey remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "I came to discuss your housing situation." Charles gestured weakly toward the foreclosure notice. "The bank sold our mortgage to some investment company. They're not interested in negotiating payment plans." "Golden Gate Property Holdings," Harvey said. "They specialize in distressed real estate acquisition. You know about them?" Patricia asked. "I am them," Harvey said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia sank into her chair as if her legs could no longer support her weight. "You own our mortgage?" "I own your debt, yes. All of it." Harvey pulled out a folder and set it on the coffee table next to their legal documents. "Your mortgage balance, the second mortgage you took out for Billy's expansion, the home equity line of credit. Everything." Charles opened the folder with shaking hands. The documents showed every detail of their financial obligations, now held by subsidiaries of Harvey's company. "Why?" Patricia whispered. Harvey looked around the room, taking in the photos of Billy's achievements, the furniture he'd grown up with, the space where his family had told him he wasn't wanted. 15 years ago, you made a choice in this room. You chose Billy over me, completely and permanently. You took my inheritance, money Grandpa Joe specifically left to me, and gave it to him because he was your real son. Harvey, we were wrong." "Yes, you were. But that's not why I'm here." Harvey sat down across from them, his posture relaxed but his eyes intense. "I'm here because Billy borrowed money from Kurt Jones using fraudulent financial statements, and Jones believes family members should be held responsible for each other's debts." Patricia's face went white. "What does that mean?" "It means Jones thinks I should pay Billy's debts because we're family. He suggested that bad things might happen to Billy's parents if his debts remain unpaid." Charles found his voice. "Harvey, we never asked for that. We never wanted you involved." "No, you never wanted me involved in anything," Harvey agreed. "But you involved me the moment you decided Billy was worth my grandfather's money and I wasn't." Harvey stood and walked to the mantel, looking at the photos of Billy's life that dominated the display. In 15 years, his parents had never taken a single photo of Harvey's achievements. "I have a proposal," Harvey said, turning back to face them. "I will pay Billy's debt to Kurt Jones in full. I will also restructure your mortgage through my company at a manageable payment schedule that will allow you to keep this house." Hope flickered in both their faces. "In exchange," Harvey continued, "you will transfer ownership of this house to me immediately. You'll continue living here as tenants, but you'll pay rent monthly like any other tenants. The rent will be exactly what your mortgage payment was before Billy's problem started." "That's actually generous," Charles said cautiously. "There's more," Harvey said. "You'll also sign documents acknowledging that the inheritance you took from me and gave to Billy was obtained through emotional manipulation and possibly elder abuse of my grandfather." Patricia stood up sharply. "Elder abuse? Harvey, that's not. My grandfather specifically left that money to me because he believed I had the intelligence and integrity to build something meaningful with it. You convinced him to change his will 3 weeks before he died, when he was medicated and confused." Harvey's voice remained calm. "I have documentation of your visits to his care facility during his final weeks, including recordings of you explaining why Billy was the better choice for inheritance. The blood drained from Patricia's face. Those recordings would be devastating if they ever became public. "You're blackmailing us," Charles said. "I'm offering you a choice," Harvey corrected. "Sign the documents, keep your house, and live comfortably as my tenants. Or refuse, face foreclosure, watch Billy go to prison without protection from Jones's people, and potentially face criminal charges for elder abuse." Harvey pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. It was Billy in county lockup, sporting a black eye and split lip. "Fraudsters aren't popular in jail," Harvey said, "and they're even less popular when they owe money to people like Jones on the outside." Patricia began crying then, the kind of desperate sobs that came from watching your world collapse in real time. "This is revenge," she choked out. "You're destroying our family for revenge." Harvey looked at her with something approaching pity. "Patricia, I'm not destroying your family. I'm simply allowing you to experience what I experienced 15 years ago. The realization that family loyalty is conditional and you've failed to meet the conditions." He walked to the door, then paused. "The documents will be delivered tomorrow. You have 24 hours to decide whether you want to be my tenants or Kurt, Jones's problem." As Harvey left his childhood home for what would likely be the last time, he felt an unexpected sense of completion. Not satisfaction, not happiness, but the quiet peace that came from closing a chapter that had been left unfinished for far too long. Behind him, his parents held each other and wept for the son they'd thrown away and the son they'd failed to raise properly. Both were lost to them now, but only one loss was their own fault. Chapter 9. The Price of Truth. 6 months later, Harvey sat in his office reviewing the latest reports from his expanding empire. Stout Dynamics had acquired 2 competitors, launched a revolutionary supply chain management platform, and secured government contracts worth over $50 million. The former Stout family kitchen properties had been converted into co-working spaces for tech startups, providing affordable office space and creating hundreds of new jobs. Billy had been sentenced to 30 months in federal prison with the possibility of early release for good behavior. The federal prosecutor had been surprisingly lenient, considering Billy's cooperation in providing information about other businesses using similar fraudulent practices. Charles and Patricia Stout had signed Harvey's documents and were now tenants in their former home. They paid their rent on time, kept the property maintained, and never contacted Harvey directly. The arrangement was handled through a property management company that provided a buffer between Harvey and the people who'd once been his family. The monthly rent they paid was exactly what their mortgage had been before Billy's troubles. A detail Harvey had specifically designed to remind them daily of a life they could have kept if they'd made different choices. A knock on his office door interrupted Harvey's thoughts. Marcus entered with a concerned expression. "Mr. Stout, there's a young woman here to see you. She says she's Billy's daughter." Harvey looked up sharply. Billy had never mentioned having children, but then again, they hadn't exactly been exchanging Christmas cards. "Her name? Susan Stout. She's 18, says she just graduated high school." Harvey had never met his niece. Billy's relationship with women had always been complicated, and Harvey had assumed any children were being raised by ex-girlfriends with minimal involvement from Billy. "Send her in." Susan Stout was tall like her father, but carried herself with a confidence Billy had never possessed. She had intelligent eyes and wore simple clothes that suggested practicality over fashion. She entered Harvey's office without intimidation, looking around with curiosity rather than awe. "Uncle Harvey," she said, extending her hand for a formal handshake. "I'm Susan. I think it's time we met." Harvey gestured to a chair. "I wasn't aware Billy had children." "He doesn't exactly advertise his failures as a father," Susan said dryly. "I've been raised mostly by my mom, Carla Fowler, in Portland. Dad sends money when he can, visits maybe twice a year." "I see. And what brings you to San Francisco?" Susan looked directly at him with an unsettling intensity. "I wanted to meet the uncle who destroyed my father's life." Harvey studied his niece carefully. She didn't seem angry, just curious. "Is that what Billy told you?" "Dad doesn't tell me anything useful, but I'm not stupid, and I know how to research." Susan pulled out a tablet and opened a folder. "Grandfather's Inheritance, the family conflict, your parents' treatment of you, Dad's fraudulent business practices. I've pieced together most of the story." Harvey was impressed despite himself. "And what conclusion have you reached?" "That Dad deserved what happened to him, but Grandma and Grandpa probably didn't deserve to lose their house." "They didn't lose their house. They're living in it right now, as tenants to their estranged son, paying rent for a house they owned for 30 years. Susan closed her tablet. "It's psychologically devastating, even if it's financially sustainable." Harvey leaned back in his chair. This girl was sharper than anyone in her family had ever been. "What do you want from me, Susan?" "I want to understand whether my uncle is someone who destroys people for sport, or someone who ensures actions have consequences." She met his gaze steadily. "Because if it's the first one, I need to know what kind of man I'm related to. If it's the second one, I'd like to propose something." "I'm listening." Susan pulled out a business plan, professionally bound and clearly well-researched. "I'm starting college in January, studying business and computer science at UC Berkeley. I've got a 4-year academic scholarship, but I need startup capital for a mobile app I've been developing." Harvey looked at the business plan's cover page. "Food share, connecting food service workers with flexible employment opportunities." "You want me to invest in your business?" "I want you to consider whether investing in family members who actually have viable business models and honest intentions might be more satisfying than punishing family members who don't." Harvey opened the business plan and began reading. The concept was intelligent. A platform that would help restaurant and catering workers find flexible employment across multiple businesses with built-in benefits portability and skills verification. The market research was thorough, the financial projections realistic, and the technical requirements well within his company's expertise. "This is actually good," Harvey admitted. "I know. I inherited Grandfather Joe's business sense, apparently, along with your ability to see problems clearly and Dad's charm when I need it." Susan smiled for the first time. "I also inherited Mom's common sense, which is why I stayed away from Dad's business decisions." Harvey closed the business plan and looked at his niece with new respect. "Why come to me? There are plenty of legitimate investors who would be interested in this. Because you understand what it's like to build something from nothing. Because you know the value of proving yourself without family connections." Susan paused. "And because I think you're tired of being angry at people who can't change the past." Harvey was quiet for a long moment. "What do you know about forgiveness, Susan?" "I know that forgiveness isn't about pretending bad things didn't happen. It's about choosing not to let those bad things control your future." She leaned forward. "Dad made terrible choices, and he's paying for them. Grandma and Grandpa made terrible choices, and they're paying for them. You've made sure justice was served. And now you get to choose whether you want to spend the rest of your life being the son who was wronged, or the uncle who helped his niece build something meaningful." Harvey stood and walked to his window, looking down at the city he'd conquered through determination and careful planning. Susan was right. He had proven everything he needed to prove. His family's rejection had forged him into someone stronger than any of them could imagine, and their current suffering was proof that his path had been the right one. $50,000, Harvey said, turning back to face her. "For 10% equity and a seat on your board of advisors." Susan smiled, and for the first time, Harvey saw a family resemblance he actually welcomed. "Deal." They shook hands across his desk. Two members of the Stout family finally united by mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. Over the following months, Harvey gradually shifted his focus from revenge to rebuilding. He maintained the property arrangements with his parents. They remained tenants in their former home, learning daily what it meant to depend on someone else's mercy. But he stopped actively monitoring their suffering. Billy served 22 months of his sentence and emerged from prison a genuinely changed man. Harvey never spoke to him directly, but through Susan, he learned that Billy had used his time productively, earning his GED completion and taking business courses designed to help ex-felons start legitimate enterprises. When Billy was released, he found a job washing dishes at a restaurant in Portland, the same work Harvey had once done to survive. Billy never asked his brother for help, never sent messages through Susan, never attempted contact of any kind. It was, Harvey realized, the first intelligent decision Billy had made in years. Susan's app launched during her sophomore year and quickly gained traction among food service workers tired of unreliable scheduling and poor benefits. Harvey's investment had grown to be worth over $2 million by the time Susan graduated, and their business relationship had evolved into something approaching genuine family connection. On a warm Saturday morning in June, Harvey received an unexpected letter delivered to his home address. The return address showed Sacramento County Jail, and the handwriting was his father's. Inside was a single page. Asterisk Harvey. Susan showed me the success of her business and mentioned your guidance. I wanted you to know that Patricia and I are proud of what you've built and proud of the man you've become. We failed you as parents. We chose favorites. We believed the wrong things about what made someone valuable, and we destroyed our relationship with a son who deserved better. You don't owe us forgiveness, and we don't expect it, but we wanted you to know that we understand now what we lost when we cast you aside. Your grandfather would be proud of everything you've accomplished. Charles Asterisk. Harvey read the letter twice, then filed it away in his home office. He didn't respond, but he also didn't throw it away. Some wounds healed with time and distance. Others required acknowledgement and understanding. Harvey wasn't ready for reconciliation, and might never be, but the letter represented something important. His parents finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. That evening, Harvey had dinner with Susan at a small restaurant in Berkeley, one that employed several workers who'd found positions through her app. As they talked about her expansion plans and his company's latest innovations, Harvey realized that revenge had given him justice, but building something new had given him peace. The stout family name, which had once been used to exclude him, now represented innovation, integrity, and success. His parents had wanted to preserve their family legacy by investing in Billy. Instead, they destroyed that legacy and rebuilt it in Harvey's image. As Susan laughed at one of his stories about the early days of his company, Harvey thought about the inheritance that had started it all. His grandfather's $150,000 had indeed changed someone's life, just not in the way his parents had intended. Billy had used it to build temporary success that crumbled under scrutiny. Harvey had used its absence to build permanent success that grew stronger with every challenge. In the end, both brothers had received exactly what they deserved. The family that had been broken by greed and favoritism had been reborn through merit and mutual respect. And Harvey Stout, the unwanted adopted son, had become the patriarch of something far more valuable than the biological family that had rejected him. Justice, Harvey had learned, wasn't about punishment. Justice was about truth, and truth, given enough time, always won. Epilogue. 5 years later, Harvey Stout stood on the deck of his new headquarters in downtown San Francisco, a 50-story tower that bore his name and housed not just Stout Dynamics, but Susan's company and a dozen other startups he'd helped launch. Below, the city sprawled in all directions, full of dreamers and builders and people determined to create something meaningful from nothing. His parents still lived in his house, paid their rent on time, and had never asked for anything beyond the basic landlord-tenant relationship. Billy had opened a small, honest restaurant in Portland, serving simple food with integrity and employing several people who'd gotten their start through Susan's platform. The Stout family had been broken and rebuilt, stronger and more honest than before. And Harvey Stout, the son who was supposed to amount to nothing, had created a legacy that would outlast them all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Trust. Edmund Weston had built his empire from nothing. Starting as a construction worker in Detroit, he'd clawed his way up through sheer determination and an unwavering code. Loyalty above all else. By 42, he owned Weston Construction, the largest infrastructure company in the Midwest, with contracts spanning 3 states. His weathered hands told the story of a man who'd never forgotten where he came from, even as his bank account grew into 8 figures. The cornerstone of Edmund's life was his family. He'd married Renee Burke 20 years ago, a radiant woman with auburn hair and emerald eyes who'd captured his heart at a construction site charity event. She'd been volunteering, serving coffee to workers, and Edmund had been struck not just by her beauty, but by her genuine warmth toward the blue-collar men others might have overlooked. Their son, Troy Weston, now 19, was everything Edmund had hoped for in an heir. Sharp-minded, respectful, and showing genuine interest in the family business. Troy had just completed his freshman year at Michigan State, studying civil engineering. During summers, he worked construction sites, earning the respect of Edmund's crew through sweat and competence rather than nepotism. Renee's sister, Cheryl Marshall, had always been the family's wild card. 3 years younger than Renee, she drifted through life on her looks and charm, never quite settling into anything substantial. Her engagement to Scott Dawson, a smooth-talking real estate developer, had been announced 6 months ago, much to Edmund's private skepticism. There was something about Scott's too-perfect smile and his habit of avoiding direct eye contact that set Edmund's instincts on edge. The Weston household was a testament to Edmund's success and values. Their sprawling home in Bloomfield Hills sat on 5 acres, with a workshop where Edmund still tinkered with engines and taught Troy the fundamentals of machinery. Family dinners were sacred, phones put away, conversation flowing easily between construction site stories and Troy's college experiences. But beneath the surface of this American dream, cracks were forming that Edmund couldn't yet see. Renee had been distant lately, claiming stress from planning Cheryl's engagement party. She'd been taking more spa days, more shopping trips, more time away from the family rhythm that had defined their marriage. When Edmund mentioned it, she'd smile and deflect, talking about how she deserved to enjoy the fruits of his labor. The engagement party was scheduled for a Saturday in late September, with Scott's family flying in from California. Edmund had insisted on hosting it at their home, despite Renee's strange reluctance. "It's family," he'd said firmly. "Family celebrates together." As the party approached, Edmund noticed subtle changes in the household dynamics. Renee and Cheryl would stop conversations when he entered rooms. Phone calls would end abruptly. Most unsettling, Troy seemed to be avoiding family gatherings, claiming extra study sessions or work shifts. When Edmund pressed him, Troy would look away, mumbling something about giving the women space to plan. The night before the party, Edmund found himself in his workshop, hands busy with an engine rebuild, but his mind elsewhere. His phone buzzed with a text from his foreman, Carlos Webb. "Boss, that new safety inspector's been asking questions about our permits. Seems off. Thought you should know." Edmund frowned. His company's paperwork was immaculate, but in his world, questions from strangers usually meant trouble. He made a mental note to investigate Monday morning, after the family celebration ended. He had no idea that by Monday morning, his entire world would be ash and rubble, and that Carlos's warning would prove to be the least of his concerns. Chapter 2. The Proposal Trap. The day of Cheryl's engagement party dawned crisp and clear, with autumn leaves painting the Weston property in brilliant golds and reds. Edmund had hired a catering company and set up the backyard with white tents and elegant lighting. Despite his reservations about Scott, he was determined to give Cheryl the celebration she deserved. By noon, guests began arriving. Scott's family from California seemed pleasant enough, though Edmund noticed they kept their distance from the construction workers and their families who made up Edmund's inner circle. The social divide was subtle but present, with Scott's people clustering around the bar, while Edmund's crew gravitated toward the food and lawn games. Edmund watched from the deck as Scott worked the crowd, his charm turned up to maximum. The man had perfected the art of making everyone feel like the most important person in the room, at least for the 30 seconds he spent with them. But Edmund's trained, I caught the calculation behind every smile, the way Scott's attention always drifted to whoever might be most useful to him. "You're brooding again," Renee said, appearing at his elbow with a champagne flute. She looked stunning in a navy blue dress that hugged her curves, her hair styled in an elegant updo. But there was something in her eyes Edmund couldn't quite read, a nervousness that seemed to go beyond normal party anxiety. "Just watching," Edmund replied, accepting the drink. "Making sure everyone's having a good time." "They are." Cheryl's practically glowing. Renee's voice carried a note Edmund had never heard before, almost like she was trying to convince herself of something. Troy appeared through the crowd, looking sharp in a charcoal suit, but carrying himself with unusual tension. "Dad, Carlos is here with the crew. They're asking about Monday's schedule." Edmund nodded, then paused. Something in Troy's tone was off. His son was usually direct, confident. Today he seemed almost guilty. "Tell them we'll discuss it Monday. Today's about family." As Troy melted back into the crowd, Edmund noticed him exchange a look with Renee. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but Edmund had spent decades reading people, and what he saw in that glance made his blood run cold. It was the look of conspirators, of people sharing a secret. The formal proposal was scheduled for 4 p.m., with Scott having planned an elaborate speech followed by a second proposal with a new ring. Apparently, the first one hadn't been special enough for such a momentous occasion. Edmund thought it was theatrical nonsense, but he kept his opinion to himself. At 3:45, as guests gathered in the backyard, Edmund's phone rang. The caller ID showed Troy's number, which was odd since his son was supposed to be helping coordinate the proposal. Edmund stepped into his study to answer. "Dad." Troy's voice was strained, barely above a whisper. "I'm at the hospital. I've been in an accident." Edmund's world tilted. "What kind of accident? Are you hurt?" "Car accident. I'm going into surgery. They said it's serious." Troy's voice cracked. "I need you here." Edmund's training kicked in. Crisis management, clear thinking, decisive action. "I'm on my way." "Which hospital?" "Beaumont." "Dad, I'm scared." The line went dead. Edmund stared at the phone, his mind racing. Troy had been here 20 minutes ago. How had he gotten to the hospital so quickly? And why hadn't anyone else noticed he was gone? Edmund burst through the study door, scanning the crowd for Renee. He found her by the gift table, laughing with Scott's mother. When she saw his face, her smile faltered. "Renee, we need to go. Now." Troy's been in an accident. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the patio stones. But instead of the shock and panic Edmund expected, what he saw in her eyes was something else entirely. Annoyance, frustration, and then, most chilling of all, a quick glance toward Scott. "Don't call me at a time like this," she snapped, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet patio. "Today is my sister's proposal celebration." Edmund stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Around them, the party guests had gone silent, sensing the tension. Scott appeared beside them, his arms sliding around Renee's waist in a gesture that seemed far too familiar. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment," Cheryl laughed, though her eyes were cold. "Stop ruining it." Edmund's gaze moved slowly from his wife to Scott, taking in the man's protective stance, the way his hand rested on Renee's hip, the guilty flush creeping up Scott's neck. The pieces clicked into place with brutal clarity. "How long?" Edmund's voice was quiet, deadly. "Edmund, please," Renee started, but Scott stepped forward. "Look, this isn't how we wanted you to find out, but..." The rest of Scott's words were lost as Edmund's fist connected with his jaw. Scott dropped like a stone, blood streaming from his split lip. Cheryl screamed. Guests scattered, and somewhere in the chaos, Edmund heard his phone ringing again. With shaking hands, he answered. "Troy, Dad, where are you?" "The surgery. They need consent forms signed." "I'm scared." Edmund looked at his wife, at her lover bleeding on the patio stones, at the wreckage of his family celebration. "I'm coming, son. Daddy's coming." As he walked toward his truck, Carlos Webb stepped into his path. "Boss, you need to know. The kid. Troy's been covering for them. He's been their lookout, their alibi. I'm sorry, but you needed to know." Edmund stopped walking. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place. Troy's strange behavior, his avoidance, his guilt. His own son had been part of this betrayal. "Thank you, Carlos," Edmund said quietly. "Take care of the guests. Tell them the party's over." As he drove toward the hospital, Edmund's mind was already working, calculating, planning. He'd built an empire by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than anyone who tried to cross him. Now, for the first time in 20 years, someone had betrayed him. Multiple someones. People he'd trusted with his heart, his home, his legacy. They had no idea what they'd awakened. Chapter 3. The Emergency Room Revelation. Beaumont Hospital's emergency room was a maze of harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. Edmund's boots echoed against the polished floors as he strode toward the reception desk, his mind still reeling from the afternoon's revelations. The nurse, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, looked up from her computer. "I'm looking for Troy Weston. Car accident victim, supposed to be in surgery." She typed rapidly, frowned, typed again. "Sir, I'm not showing any patient by that name. Are you sure about the hospital?" Edmund's blood went cold. "Check again. Troy Weston, 19 years old. He called me from here." After several more minutes of searching, the nurse shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. No one by that name has been admitted today." "Are you sure he said Beaumont?" Edmund's phone buzzed. A text from Troy. "Dad, where are you?" "Surgery starting soon. Room 314. He showed the message to the nurse. She looked confused. "Sir, room 314 is a storage closet. We don't have patient rooms numbered in the 300s. The realization hit Edmund like a physical blow. He'd been played. Completely, thoroughly played. His own son had lured him away from the house with a fake emergency, giving Renee and Scott the perfect cover for their affair to come to light during the chaos of the party. Edmund's hands shook as he dialed Troy's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. The phone had been turned off. "Sir, are you all right?" the nurse asked, genuine concern in her voice. "I'm fine," Edmund lied, his voice barely recognizable. "Just a misunderstanding." The drive back to Bloomfield Hills felt like a journey through hell. Edmund's mind raced through the implications. This wasn't just an affair. It was a coordinated betrayal involving his wife, her lover, and his own son. The fake emergency had been elaborately planned, complete with props and timing designed to maximum emotional impact. As he pulled into his driveway, Edmund saw that most of the guests had left. A few stragglers remained, helping with cleanup, but the celebration was clearly over. Carlos Webb approached the truck as Edmund got out. "Boss, after you left, things got interesting. Scott's been making calls, and I caught some of what he said. Something about Phase 2 and the timeline moving up. Thought you should know." Edmund nodded grimly. "Carlos, I need you to do something for me. Quietly. I need surveillance on this house. Cameras, audio, the works. Can you handle that?" "Already on it, boss. Had a feeling something was off. The equipment will be installed tomorrow while you're at the office." Edmund clasped his foreman's shoulder. "Thank you. And Carlos? Not a word to anyone. Not even the crew. You got it, boss. Just be careful. Whatever's going on here, it's bigger than just an affair." Inside the house, Edmund found the aftermath of the party. Renee was in the kitchen, mechanically loading dishes into the dishwasher. She looked up when he entered, her face pale but defiant. "Is Troy okay?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "You tell me, Renee. You seem to know more about my son's whereabouts than I do." She turned back to the dishes, avoiding his eyes. "I don't know what you mean. The hospital had no record of him. Room 314 is a storage closet. He played me, and you knew it." Renee's hands stilled on the plates. When she turned around, the mask had finally slipped. The woman he'd loved for 20 years was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "Edmund, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. My wife, my son, and my soon-to-be brother-in-law have been planning this for months. The only question is why." Before Renee could answer, the front door opened. Scott walked in, his jaw swollen and a butterfly bandage over his split lip. Behind him came Troy, looking sullen and avoiding eye contact. "Dad," Troy started, but Edmund held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." Edmund studied his son's face, looking for any trace of the boy he'd raised, the young man he'd been so proud of. What he saw instead was a stranger, someone who'd learned to lie with practiced ease, who'd betrayed his own father without apparent remorse. "How long have you been part of this?" Edmund asked quietly. Troy's jaw tightened. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Scott stepped forward, his voice slightly slurred from his swollen jaw. "Edmund, we need to talk. All of us. There are things you don't understand about your family, about your business, about a lot of things." Edmund's laugh was bitter. "Oh, I think I understand plenty. My wife's been sleeping with my future brother-in-law, and my son's been helping them cover it up. What else is there to understand? The house," Renee said suddenly. "The company. The accounts. Edmund, you're going to lose everything anyway. We were trying to save what we could." Edmund felt the world tilt again. "What are you talking about?" Scott pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like legal documents. "Those permits Carlos mentioned? They're fraudulent. The safety violations on your job sites? They're real. The state's been building a case against Weston Construction for months. By next week, you'll be facing federal charges." The room spun. Edmund gripped the counter for support. "That's impossible. I run a clean operation." "No, you don't," Troy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You just thought you did. Scott's been helping me understand how the business really works. The shortcuts, the bribes, the safety violations. It's all going to come out." Edmund stared at his son, seeing the truth in his eyes. Not just betrayal, but something worse. Troy actually believed what he was saying. He'd been convinced that his father was a criminal, that the empire Edmund had built was constructed on lies and corruption. "So, you decided to what?" "Steal everything before I got arrested." "We decided to protect what we could," Renee said, her voice strengthening. "Scott has connections. He can make this go away, but only if we cooperate." Edmund's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but not in the way his family thought. This wasn't just about an affair or even about framing him for crimes. This was about something much bigger, much more carefully planned. And what does Scott get out of this generous offer? Scott's smile was cold. A successful construction company, a beautiful wife, a stepson who respects him. Everything you're about to lose. Edmund nodded slowly, as if considering. "I see. And you really think the state has a case against me?" "We know they do," Troy said. "I've seen the evidence. Scott showed me." "Show me." For the next hour, Edmund listened as his family laid out their case against him. Falsified permits, ignored safety violations, bribed inspectors. The evidence was comprehensive, damning, and completely fabricated. But it was also extremely well done, professional enough to fool investigators and family members alike. As Scott spoke, Edmund noticed something the others had missed. Every piece of evidence could be traced back to Scott himself. The man had spent months creating an elaborate frame job, convincing Troy that his father was a criminal while simultaneously seducing his wife and positioning himself to take over everything Edmund had built. "This is very thorough," Edmund said finally. "Very impressive work." Scott preened. "I've been working on it for almost a year. The state investigators I've been feeding information to are completely convinced. And they're going to arrest me when? Monday morning. Unless you sign these papers tonight." Scott slid a stack of documents across the counter. "Transfer of business assets, property deeds, bank account authorizations. Sign these, and I can make the charges disappear." Edmund picked up the papers, scanning them carefully. It was all there, a complete transfer of his life's work to Scott Dawson, with Renee and Troy as beneficiaries. In exchange, Scott would use his connections to make the criminal charges vanish. "What happens to me?" "You disappear," Renee said, not meeting his eyes. "Scott has a place in Mexico. You can start over there. And if I refuse, then you go to prison for 20 years, Troy said, his voice cracking slightly. "Dad, please. This is the only way." Edmund set down the papers and looked at each of them in turn. His wife, his son, and the man who'd orchestrated it all. They were waiting for his answer, confident that they'd backed him into a corner with no escape. They had no idea that Edmund Weston had been fighting his way out of corners his entire life, and that he'd never lost a battle that truly mattered. "I need time to think," he said finally. "You have until midnight," Scott said. "After that, the offer expires and the charges get filed." Edmund nodded. "Then I guess I'd better get thinking." As he walked toward his study, Edmund caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. The man staring back looked older, tired, defeated. But behind his eyes, something was stirring. Something dark and patient and utterly ruthless. Scott Dawson thought he was the predator in this scenario. He was about to learn what it meant to be prey. Chapter 4. The Architect of Destruction. Edmund sat in his study, surrounded by 20 years of memories and achievements. Awards lined the walls, photos of construction sites, and ribbon cuttings documenting his rise from nothing to everything. On his desk lay Scott's papers, the instruments of his supposed surrender. But Edmund Weston had not built an empire by surrendering. He opened his laptop and began to type, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, he had Carlos Webb on a secure video call. Carlos, I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this conversation. You got it, boss. Scott Dawson has been systematically framing me for crimes I didn't commit. He's got forged documents, fabricated evidence, the works. But more than that, he's convinced my family that I'm guilty. Carlos's face darkened. That son of a bitch. What do you need? I need you to contact Detective Adrian Dunn at the State Police. You remember him from the charity poker games? Tell him I have information about a conspiracy to defraud the State Investigation Unit. But don't mention Scott's name yet. I want to control how this unfolds. Consider it done. What else? The surveillance equipment you mentioned, I need it installed tonight. And I need you to gather the crew. The loyal ones. The ones who've been with me since the beginning. We're going to need them. After ending the call, Edmund opened his safe and retrieved a file he'd hoped never to use. Inside were background checks on everyone in his inner circle, family, employees, contractors. He'd learned long ago that in business, information was the ultimate weapon. Scott Dawson's file was thin but revealing. Born in San Francisco, moved to Detroit 6 months ago, officially a real estate developer, but with no significant projects to his name. What was interesting was what wasn't there: no long-term employment history, no substantial assets, no deep local connections. Scott was exactly what he appeared to be, a professional con man. But the real revelation came when Edmund cross-referenced Scott's arrival in Detroit with a timeline of his family's behavioral changes. Scott had been working on this scheme for almost a year, carefully cultivating relationships, gathering information, positioning himself for the kill. Edmund's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Dunn. Got your message. Can you meet tonight? This sounds serious. Edmund smiled for the first time in hours. Warehouse on Miller Road. Midnight. As he prepared to leave, Edmund made one more call. This one to his lawyer, Aaron Connor, a sharp-eyed man who'd handled the company's legal affairs for a decade. Aaron, I need you to do something off the books. I'm going to send you some documents. I want you to examine them and tell me how they were fabricated. Don't worry about the legal implications. Just focus on the technical aspects. Edmund, what's going on? Someone's trying to frame me. I need to know how they did it so I can prove it. Within an hour, Aaron called back. Edmund, these documents are good. Really good. Whoever made them had access to state database systems, official letterhead, even internal case numbers. This is an amateur hour. Could Scott Dawson have done this alone? No way. He'd need help from someone inside the system. Someone with access to real case files and the ability to manipulate records. Edmund nodded. Keep digging. I'll be in touch. At 11:30 p.m., Edmund arrived at the warehouse where he'd started his business 20 years ago. The building was dark, empty, but it held memories of every success and failure that had brought him to this moment. At exactly midnight, headlights swept across the parking lot. Detective Adrian Dunn stepped out of an unmarked police car, his face grave. Edmund, Carlos, fill me in on some of this. What exactly are we dealing with? Edmund handed him copies of Scott's fabricated evidence. Someone's been feeding your department false information about my company. I think they're planning to use fake charges to force me out of business. Dunn examined the documents under a flashlight. Jesus, these look official. If someone brought these to me, I'd have no reason to doubt them. That's the point. But look at this. Edmund pointed to a date stamp on one of the permits. This is supposed to be from last March, but the serial number format wasn't implemented until June. Whoever made this was working from outdated templates. Dunn's eyes sharpened. You think this Scott Dawson is behind it? I know he is, but he's not working alone. He has someone inside your department helping him. That's a serious accusation. I'm not making accusations. I'm offering to help you catch them. For the next hour, Edmund and Dunn worked through the evidence, identifying inconsistencies and impossible timelines. By 1 a.m., they had a clear picture of the conspiracy. "I need you to do something for me," Edmund said. "I need you to pretend to go along with this. Let Scott think his plan is working." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if we're patient, we can catch him in the act. But I need time to set things up on my end." Dunn nodded. "How long?" "Give me a week. Maybe 2. Can you stall any official investigation that long?" "For an old friend? I can manage it." As they parted ways, Edmund felt the familiar satisfaction of a plan coming together. Scott thought he was the puppet master, but he was about to learn that Edmund Weston played chess while others played checkers. Driving home, Edmund's phone rang. It was Troy. "Dad, we need to talk. I've been thinking about what Scott said, and Not over the phone." Edmund cut him off. "Meet me at the office tomorrow. Just you and me." "Dad, I'm sorry. I really thought." "Tomorrow, Troy. We'll talk tomorrow." As Edmund pulled into his driveway, he saw that the lights were still on in the house. Through the window, he could see Renee and Scott sitting close together on the couch, probably planning their next move. But thanks to Carlos's surveillance equipment, their planning session would be recorded. Edmund parked and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. In less than 24 hours, his world had been turned upside down. But he'd survived worse. He'd built something from nothing once before, and if necessary, he'd do it again. But first, he was going to destroy everyone who'd betrayed him. Methodically, completely, and without mercy. As he walked toward the house, Edmund Weston began to smile. The game was just beginning. Chapter 5. The Son's Confession. The next morning, Edmund arrived at his office before dawn. The Weston Construction headquarters occupied 3 floors of a downtown Detroit high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city Edmund had helped rebuild. He'd always found peace in the early morning quiet, the sense of potential that came with each new day. Today, that peace was shattered. Troy was waiting in the lobby, looking haggard and younger than his 19 years. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who'd spent the night wrestling with his conscience. "Dad," he said, standing as Edmund approached. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Edmund gestured toward the elevator. "Let's go upstairs." In his office, Edmund poured coffee from the machine his secretary kept stocked. He offered a cup to Troy, who shook his head. "I can't. I haven't been sleeping. Haven't been eating much either." Edmund settled behind his desk, studying his son's face. "So talk." Troy's words came out in a rush. "Dad, I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. When Scott first approached me, he said he was just concerned about Mom. He said she seemed unhappy, that maybe you and her needed to work things out." "When did he first approach you?" "Last Christmas. He said he was worried about the family, about how hard you were working. He seemed to really care about Mom's happiness." Edmund nodded, his face impassive. "Go on." He started asking questions about the business. Nothing that seemed suspicious at first, just general stuff about construction, about how the company operated. He said he might want to invest, maybe partner with you on some projects. "And you told him about company operations?" Troy shifted uncomfortably. "Not sensitive stuff, just general things. How he bid on jobs, how he managed projects. He was going to be family, Dad. I thought it was okay." Edmund's jaw tightened. "When did it change?" "A few months ago. He started showing me documents, evidence he said he'd found about safety violations, permit issues. He said he was trying to protect the family from what was coming." "And you believed him?" Troy's voice cracked. "He had official documents, Dad. State letterhead, case numbers, everything. He said there was going to be an investigation, that you could go to prison. He said the only way to save the family was to cooperate." Edmund leaned forward. "Cooperate how?" He needed access to company files, financial records, employee information. He said he was building a defense, finding ways to minimize the damage. I gave him my access codes. The admission hung in the air between them. Edmund felt a cold rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. What else? He needed alibis. Times when Mom could meet with lawyers, when they could work on the defense without you knowing. He said it was important to keep you out of it until they had a strategy. "So you provided cover for their affair." Troy's face crumpled. "I didn't know it was an affair. I swear, Dad. I thought they were working together to save the family." Well, I found out about them. It was too late. Scott said if I backed out now, you'd definitely go to prison. Edmund stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Troy, I need you to understand something. There is no state investigation. The documents Scott showed you were fabricated. The evidence was fake. All of it. But you saw what he wanted you to see. Scott Dawson is a con man. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. He used your love for this family to turn you against me. Troy was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting everyone. I know you did. Edmund turned back to his son. But thinking isn't enough. You gave him everything he needed to destroy me. Company secrets, financial information, access to our systems. Do you understand what that means? Troy nodded miserably. I've ruined everything. Yes, you have. Edmund's voice was cold, final. But more than that, you chose to believe a stranger over your own father. You chose to trust someone you'd known for months over the man who raised you. Dad, please. I'm not finished. Edmund's tone cut through Troy's plea. You didn't just betray me, Troy. You betrayed everyone who depends on this company. Carlos, who's worked for me for 15 years. The crews who trust me to keep them employed. The families who depend on us for their livelihoods. You were willing to sacrifice all of them based on the word of con man. Troy was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I can fix this. I can help you stop him. Can you? Or will you just find another reason to doubt me when things get difficult? I won't. I promise. Edmund walked around the desk and stood in front of his son. Troy, I've spent my life building something worth passing down to you. I've worked 18-hour days, sacrificed time with family, made enemies and allies, also that someday you could inherit something meaningful. I know, Dad. I know. No, you don't. Because if you really understood what this company represents, what it means to the people who work here, you never would have betrayed it. You never would have betrayed me. Troy looked up at his father, desperation in his eyes. What can I do? How can I make this right? Edmund was quiet for a long moment. You can start by telling me everything. Every conversation with Scott, every piece of information you gave him, every lie you told on his behalf. Everything. For the next 2 hours, Troy talked. He detailed Scott's patient manipulation, the way the con man had gradually built trust before making larger and larger requests. He described the fake documents, the manufactured urgency, the careful way Scott had isolated him from his father while making him complicit in the scheme. When Troy finished, Edmund had a complete picture of Scott's operation. It was even more sophisticated than he'd realized, with multiple layers of deception and manipulation. But it was also built on a foundation of lies that could be systematically exposed. Dad, Troy said finally, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've broken something between us that can't be fixed. But please, let me help you stop him. Edmund studied his son's face, seeing the genuine remorse and desperation there. Part of him wanted to forgive, to rebuild the relationship that had been so important to both of them. But a larger part of him, the part that had built an empire through ruthless pragmatism, saw only weakness and betrayal. You want to help? Edmund asked. Yes, anything. Then you're going to do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, without question or hesitation. You're going to help me destroy Scott Dawson and everyone who helped him, including your mother. Troy flinched. Dad, Mom was manipulated too. She's as much a victim as... Your mother is a grown woman who made her choices. She chose to believe Scott over me, just like you did. She chose to plan my destruction, just like you did. And she chose to betray 20 years of marriage for a con man she'd known for less than a year. But, no, but's Troy. You forfeited the right to defend her when you became part of this. You either help me completely, or you get out of my sight and never come back. Troy stared at his father, seeing a coldness there he'd never witnessed before. This wasn't the man who'd taught him to drive, who'd worked beside him on construction sites, who'd been proud of his college grades. This was someone harder, more dangerous. I'll help, Troy whispered. Good, because what comes next is going to require both of us to do things we never thought we'd do. And when it's over, Scott Dawson is going to wish he'd never heard the name Weston. Edmund walked back to his desk and began making notes. First, you're going to go home and act like nothing's changed. You're going to keep Scott thinking you're on his side. But everything he says, everything he does, you're going to report back to me. Okay. Second, you're going to help me set a trap. Scott thinks he's won, but he's about to learn that I don't lose. Ever. Troy nodded, wiping his eyes. What do you need me to do? Edmund pulled out his phone and showed Troy a text message. Tonight, Scott's going to receive some very interesting information about offshore accounts and hidden assets. Information that will make him think he's found the mother lode. But it's fake. It's bait. And your job is to make sure he takes it. As Troy left the office, Edmund felt the familiar satisfaction of pieces falling into place. Scott had spent months manipulating his family, but Edmund was about to turn that manipulation back on itself. The game was entering its second phase, and Edmund Weston always played to win. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. 3 days after Troy's confession, Edmund watched from his study as Scott paced in the living room below, his phone pressed to his ear. The surveillance equipment Carlos had installed was working perfectly, capturing every word of Scott's increasingly frantic conversations. No, the timeline has to move up, Scott was saying to someone on the other end. He's getting suspicious. We need to finalize everything tonight. Edmund smiled coldly. Scott had no idea how suspicious Edmund actually was, or how thoroughly his plan had been compromised. For the past 72 hours, Edmund had been feeding Scott carefully crafted misinformation through Troy, each piece designed to make the con man overconfident and reckless. The crown jewel had been the discovery of Edmund's supposed offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Troy had accidentally let slip that his father kept detailed financial records in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The information was completely fabricated, but Scott had bought it completely. Edmund's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Dunn. Your friend took the bait. He just contacted our insider asking for help accessing federal banking records. We got him on wire fraud now. The insider Dunn referenced was Detective Marcella Stark, a longtime member of the Financial Crimes Unit who'd been feeding Scott information for months. What Scott didn't know was that Stark had been under internal investigation for corruption, and Dunn had flipped her weeks ago. Every piece of evidence Scott thought he was getting from inside the police department was actually being carefully orchestrated by Edmund and Dunn. Edmund walked downstairs, timing his entrance perfectly. Scott was just ending his call, his face flushed with excitement. Edmund, Scott said, trying to look casual. I was just checking with my contact at the state. The investigation is moving faster than expected. We really need those documents signed tonight. I've been thinking about your offer, Edmund said carefully. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for me to step aside. Scott's eyes lit up. You're making the right choice. For everyone involved. But I have conditions. Scott's smile faltered slightly. What kind of conditions? I want guarantees, legal protections, and I want to make sure my legitimate assets are protected before I sign anything over. Of course. What did you have in mind? Edmund pulled out a folder he'd prepared. I have some investments and accounts that need to be transferred properly. Offshore holdings, that kind of thing. I need to make sure they're handled correctly before I disappear. Scott's predatory instincts took over. Offshore accounts? How much are we talking about? Enough to make retirement comfortable, but I'll need help accessing them. The paperwork is complex, and I'll need someone I trust to handle the transfers. I could help with that, Scott said eagerly. I have experience with international banking. I was hoping you'd say that. Edmund handed him the folder. These are the account details. But Edmund, this has to stay between us. If Renee finds out about these accounts, she won't hear it from me, Scott assured him, already leafing through the fabricated documents. This is substantial, Edmund. 20 years of careful investment. I'd hate to see it all disappear into government seizures. Scott's mind was clearly racing, calculating percentages and possibilities. When do you need this handled? Tomorrow. The banks close early on Fridays, so if we're going to do this, it has to be then. Consider done. Scott was practically salivating. And Edmund, you're making the smart choice. This way, everyone wins. As Scott hurried upstairs to share the news with Renee, Edmund allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Greed was such a predictable weakness, and Scott had just walked into a trap that would destroy him completely. Edmund's phone rang. Carlos Webb's name appeared on the screen. "Boss, the team is in position. Dunn's people are ready to move. You sure about the timing? Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Scott will be at First National Bank trying to access accounts that don't exist. When he attempts to use forged federal banking credentials, they'll have him cold." And the wife. Edmund's expression hardened. "Renee will be dealt with separately. I have something special planned for her. Boss, I gotta ask, what about Troy? He's been helping us, but Troy made his choice when he betrayed this family. There are consequences for that." Edmund ended the call and walked to his safe, retrieving a thick manila envelope. Inside were documents that would reshape his family's future: a revised will, updated business partnerships, and several other legal instruments that would ensure his legacy survived even if he didn't. Upstairs, he could hear Renee and Scott celebrating what they thought was their imminent victory. They had no idea that tomorrow would bring not wealth and freedom, but handcuffs and federal charges. Edmund poured himself a whiskey and sat in his favorite chair, looking out at the property he'd built with his own hands. By this time tomorrow, the people who'd betrayed him would understand what it meant to cross Edmund Weston. The phone rang again. This time it was Troy. "Dad, Scott's really excited about something. He's been making calls all evening about bank transfers and account access. He thinks he's found some kind of jackpot." "Good. That means he's walking into the trap exactly as planned. Dad, I need to ask you something. After this is over, after Scott's arrested, what happens to us? To our family?" Edmund was quiet for a long moment. "Troy, there is no family anymore. You made sure of that when you chose to trust a stranger over your father. But I'm helping now. I'm trying to make it right. You're helping because you got caught. You're helping because you finally realized that Scott was using you. But you didn't come to me out of loyalty or love, Troy. You came to me out of fear. That's not true. It is true, and it's why, after tomorrow, you're going to leave. You're going to start over somewhere else, build your own life, make your own way. The Weston name and the Weston legacy are no longer yours to inherit." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. When Troy finally spoke, his voice was broken. "Dad, please. I know I messed up, but I'm still your son." "No," Edmund said quietly. "My son would never have betrayed me. My son would have come to me with questions instead of conspiring behind my back. My son would have chosen family over the lies of a con man. I can change. I can prove myself to you. The time for proving yourself was months ago, when Scott first approached you. You failed that test, Troy. And in my world, there are no second chances for betrayal." Edmund ended the call and turned off his phone. Tomorrow would bring justice for Scott and Renee, but it would also mark the end of the family Edmund had spent 20 years building. As he sat in the darkness, Edmund Weston began planning for a future that would be built on the ashes of the past. He'd lost a wife and a son, but he'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that he was strong enough to survive anything, even the betrayal of those he loved most. The final act was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Bank Job. Friday morning dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering over Detroit. Edmund stood at his office window, watching the city wake up below him. Today would change everything, and he wanted to remember this moment, the calm before the storm he was about to unleash. At exactly 10 a.m., his phone rang. Detective Dunn's voice was tense with anticipation. "Edmund, everything's in place. Our people are positioned at the bank, and we've got surveillance on Scott's location. Marcella Stark is ready to play her part. What about the federal banking credentials? Scott requested them from Stark an hour ago. She provided him with fake FBI credentials that will trigger federal charges the moment he uses them. We've got him on wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy." Edmund nodded. "And Renee, that's your call. We don't have enough evidence to charge her with anything criminal, but leave Renee to me. I have my own plans for her." At 11:30, Edmund watched through his surveillance feed as Scott prepared to leave the house. The man was dressed in an expensive suit, carrying a briefcase that Edmund knew contained forged documents and fake credentials. Scott looked confident, even excited, as he kissed Renee goodbye. "Wish me luck, baby," Scott said. "By tonight, We'll be rich beyond our wildest dreams. Be careful, Renee replied, but Edmund could see the greed in her eyes. She was just as guilty as Scott, just as eager to profit from Edmund's destruction. Edmund left his office at noon, driving slowly through the city toward First National Bank. He wanted to be there to watch Scott's world collapse in real time. The bank's main branch was a marble and glass monument to financial security, with high ceilings and an atmosphere of quiet prosperity. Edmund positioned himself at a coffee shop across the street, where he had a clear view of the entrance. At 1:45 p.m., Scott arrived in a rented BMW, looking every inch the successful businessman. He strode into the bank with the confidence of a man who believed he was about to score the biggest con of his career. Edmund's phone buzzed with updates from Detective Dunn. 1:47 p.m., subject has approached customer service desk. 1:52 p.m., subject is being directed to safety deposit box area. 1:58 p.m., subject is presenting credentials to bank security. 2:03 p.m., federal agents moving in. Through the bank's glass windows, Edmund watched as FBI agents in bulletproof vests surrounded Scott at the security desk. The con man's face went from confusion to panic to rage in the space of seconds. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Edmund's phone rang. Detective Dunn's voice was triumphant. "We got him, Edmund. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted access to federal banking systems with false credentials. He's looking at 20 years minimum. What about his inside contact? Marcella Stark is already in custody. Turns out she was selling information to other criminals, too. She'll be lucky to see the outside of a prison cell before she's 60. Edmund watched as Scott was led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his arrogant confidence completely shattered. The con man who'd thought he could destroy Edmund Weston had just learned a hard lesson about underestimating his targets. But Scott's arrest was only the beginning. Edmund drove home through the storm that had been threatening all day. Rain lashed his windshield as he pulled into his driveway, and lightning illuminated the house, where his wife was probably celebrating her premature victory. Inside, he found Renee in the living room, pacing nervously and checking her phone every few seconds. "Edmund, thank God you're home. Scott went to handle some business this afternoon, and I haven't heard from him. I'm starting to worry." Edmund hung up his coat and walked to the bar, pouring himself a scotch. "I wouldn't worry about Scott anymore, Renee." "What do you mean?" "I mean Scott Dawson is currently in federal custody, charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. He'll be spending the next 20 years in prison." Renee's face went white. "That's impossible. You're lying." Edmund pulled out his phone and showed her a news article that had already been posted online. Local real estate developer arrested in banking fraud scheme. Renee sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "How did you know?" "I knew because I set him up. Every piece of information he thought he was getting from inside sources, every document he thought proved my guilt, every offshore account he thought he discovered. It was all fake, all designed to lead him into a trap." "But Troy said—" "Troy told you what I wanted him to tell you. My son may have betrayed me initially, but he's been working for me for the past week. Every conversation you and Scott had was recorded. Every plan you made was reported back to me." Renee stared at him in shock. "You've been playing us. I've been destroying you. Systematically, completely, and without mercy." Edmund's voice was cold as winter steel. Scott thought he was the predator, but he was just another mark. And you, Renee, were just another accomplice in his scheme. "Edmund, please. I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you threw away 20 years of marriage for a con man. How you were willing to destroy everything I built because you thought you'd found something better." Renee's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand. Scott made me feel alive again. He made me feel wanted, desired. When was the last time you looked at me the way he did? When was the last time you deserved to be looked at that way?" Edmund's words hit like physical blows. "You want to know the truth, Renee? Scott didn't desire you. He was using you, just like he used Troy, just like he tried to use me. You were just another tool in his con game." "That's not true." Edmund pulled out a tablet and played a recording from their surveillance system. Scott's voice filled the room, speaking to someone on the phone. "The wife is completely under control. She actually thinks I love her. It's pathetic, really, but she's useful for getting information and keeping the husband distracted. Once I have control of the company, I'll dump her and disappear with the money. Renee listened to the recording with growing horror, tears streaming down her face. He said he loved me. He said what he needed to say to manipulate you. Just like you said what you needed to say to betray me. Edmund finished his scotch and set the glass down with finality. Pack your things, Renee. You have until tomorrow morning to get out of my house. Where am I supposed to go? I don't have anywhere. That's not my problem anymore. You made your choice when you decided to destroy our marriage. Now you get to live with the consequences. What about the divorce? What about my share of? What share? Edmund's laugh was bitter. You conspired to defraud me, Renee. You participated in a criminal enterprise designed to steal everything I've worked for. Any competent lawyer will advise you to take whatever settlement I offer and be grateful you're not in prison alongside your boyfriend. Renee sobbed openly now, the full weight of her situation finally sinking in. Edmund, please. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, start over. There is no starting over. There is no working through this. You betrayed me. You betrayed our marriage. And you betrayed everything I thought we had together. Edmund's voice was final, implacable. You're dead to me, Renee. Just like Scott is dead to me. Just like Troy is dead to me. Troy? What about Troy? Troy made his choice when he decided to help Scott destroy me. He's no longer my son, and he's no longer welcome in this family. Edmund walked toward the stairs, then paused. One more thing, Renee. If you try to take anything that isn't yours, if you make any public statements about our marriage or my business, if you cause any problems whatsoever, I will make your life a living hell. Scott thought he was ruthless, but he was just an amateur compared to what I'm capable of when someone betrays me. As Edmund climbed the stairs to his bedroom, Renee's sobs echoed through the house. But he felt no sympathy, no regret, no second thoughts. She had chosen her path, and now she would walk it alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and a new life built on the ashes of the old one. Edmund Weston had lost a family, but he'd proven something more important. He was a survivor, and he was not a man to be underestimated. The reckoning was almost complete. Chapter 8. The Final Judgment. 6 months later, Edmund stood in the courthouse parking lot, watching as Troy emerged from the building with his public defender. His son, former son, Edmund corrected himself, looked thinner, older, wearing an ill-fitting suit that spoke to his changed circumstances. Troy had been charged as an accessory to Scott's fraud scheme. While the prosecutors had shown some mercy due to his cooperation and his status as a victim of manipulation, he still faced federal charges that would likely result in prison time. Edmund had not testified on his behalf. As Troy walked past Edmund's truck, their eyes met for a moment. Troy's face was a map of regret and desperation, but Edmund felt nothing. The boy who'd sat in construction sites with him, who'd learned to drive in this very parking lot, who'd made him proud at high school graduation. That boy was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd chosen betrayal over loyalty. Troy stopped walking and approached the truck. "Dad, I'm not your father anymore, Troy. We established that months ago. Please, I know you're angry, but I'm facing 5 years in federal prison. 5 years of my life gone because I trusted the wrong person. You're facing 5 years because you betrayed your family. The person you trusted was irrelevant. You chose to trust him over me." Troy's voice cracked. "I was 19 years old. I made a mistake. You made a choice. And choices have consequences." Edmund started his truck, but Troy moved to block his path. What happened to forgiveness? What happened to family loyalty? You always taught me that family comes first. I did teach you that, and you threw it back in my face the moment someone offered you what seemed like a better deal. I thought I was protecting everyone. Edmund's eyes were cold as winter ice. You thought you were protecting everyone except the one person who'd actually earned your loyalty. You were willing to believe I was a criminal, Troy. You were willing to see me destroyed based on fabricated evidence and the word of a con man you'd known for less than a year. I see that now. I understand what I did wrong. Do you? Because from where I sit, you understand that you got caught. You understand that your scheme failed, and now you're facing consequences. But but I don't think you truly understand the depth of your betrayal. Troy was crying now, something Edmund would have once found heartbreaking. Now it just seemed pathetic. What can I do? What would it take for you to forgive me? Edmund considered the question seriously. Nothing. There is nothing you can do, Troy. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. You proved that your loyalty can be bought, that your word means nothing when it's tested, that you're willing to destroy your own family if someone convinces you it's the right thing to do. That's not who I am. It's exactly who you are. And it's who you've always been. I just didn't see it before. Edmund put the truck in drive. Goodbye, Troy. Don't contact me again. As he drove away, Edmund caught sight of Troy in his rearview mirror, standing alone in the parking lot, his shoulders shaking with sobs. For just a moment, Edmund felt a flicker of the old paternal instinct. Then he remembered the betrayal, the lies, the willingness to destroy everything Edmund had built, and the feeling died. 3 blocks away, Edmund pulled into the parking lot of a small diner where Carlos Webb was waiting. His foreman slid into the passenger seat, carrying a manila folder. It's done, boss. Troy's going to prison, Scott's already there, and Renee signed the final divorce papers this morning. What did she get? Exactly what you offered. $50,000 in cash, her personal belongings, and a car. Everything else stays with you. Edmund nodded. And she signed the non-disclosure agreement. Every page. She can't talk about the marriage, the business, or anything that happened during the divorce. If she does, you get the money back, and she faces legal consequences. Good. What about Troy's legal situation? Carlos consulted his notes. His lawyer's trying to work out a plea deal. Probably looking at 3 years if he cooperates fully with the federal investigation into Scott's other schemes. Other schemes? Turns out Scott was running similar cons in 4 other cities before he came to Detroit. The FBI thinks there might be a dozen victims across the country. Troy's testimony could help convict him on multiple counts. Edmund smiled grimly. At least Troy's betrayal will serve some useful purpose. Boss, can I ask you something? Shoot. Do you ever think about, I don't know, reconciling with the boy? I mean, he was manipulated. He was young, inexperienced. Carlos, let me ask you something. If someone came to you tomorrow with evidence that I was a criminal, would you believe them? Carlos didn't hesitate. Not for a second. Why not? Because I know you. I've worked with you for 15 years. I've seen how you treat people, how you run your business, how you handle problems. I need a hell of a lot more than some stranger's word to believe you were dirty. Exactly. Troy lived with me for 19 years. He saw how I built this company, how I treated my employees, how I handled success and failure. And despite all of that, he was willing to believe I was a criminal based on forged documents and the word of a con man. Carlos nodded slowly. That says something about his character. It says everything about his character. And that's why there's no going back. Edmund took the folder Carlos had brought and leafed through the contents. Financial statements, legal documents, business contracts, the paperwork of rebuilding a life after betrayal. What's next, boss? Next, we expand. I'm thinking about opening a branch in Florida, maybe one in Texas. Fresh markets, new opportunities. Sound good. What about here in Detroit? Detroit will always be home. But it's time to build something bigger, something that can't be destroyed by the betrayal of family members or the schemes of con men. As they sat in the diner parking lot, Edmund thought about the past 6 months. He'd lost a wife, a son, and the future he'd thought he was building. But he'd gained something too, absolute clarity about who he could trust and who he couldn't. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Dad, please. Just give me one chance to make this right. I love you. Troy. Edmund deleted the message without responding, then blocked the number. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Carlos, there's something else I want you to know. What's that, boss? You, and the men who stayed loyal during all this, you're my family now. The company isn't just a business anymore. It's a legacy. And that legacy will go to people who've earned it through loyalty and hard work, not blood relations who can't be trusted. Carlos extended his hand. I'm honored, boss. We all are. Scott didn't just seduce me. He targeted me specifically, researched our marriage, our family, our weaknesses. He knew exactly what to say exactly how to make me feel special and wanted. I was vulnerable, and he exploited that vulnerability with surgical precision. I'm not making excuses. I chose to believe his lies. I chose to betray 20 years of marriage. I chose to help him destroy the man who'd given me everything. But I want you to understand that it wasn't just an affair. It was a carefully planned manipulation designed to tear our family apart. The worst part is what he did to Troy. Our son was just a kid, Edmund, 19 years old and desperate to be accepted as a man. Scott saw that desperation and used it against him. He convinced Troy that helping him was the only way to save our family. Troy genuinely believed he was protecting us. I know you'll never forgive either of us, and I don't expect you to, but Troy is still your son, and he's suffering in ways you can't imagine. Prison destroyed him, Edmund. He came out broken, homeless, unemployable. He's been living on the streets for months, too proud to ask for help and too ashamed to face what he's become. I tried to help him, but I had nothing to give. The money you gave me is long gone, spent on lawyers and basic survival. I've been working minimum wage jobs when I could find them, living in places you wouldn't house animals. This isn't a plea for sympathy, it's just the truth. Troy came to see me last week. He looked like a ghost, Edmund. Thin, dirty, defeated. He told me he'd rather die than continue living with the guilt of what he'd done to you. I'm afraid he means it. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm asking anyway. Please don't let our son destroy himself over mistakes he made as a teenager. He was manipulated just like I was. The difference is I was old enough to know better. He wasn't. I can't live with what I've done anymore. The guilt, the shame, the knowledge that I destroyed the best thing in my life for a lie. It's too much. But maybe my death can serve a purpose. Maybe it can help you understand that Troy needs his father, even if he doesn't deserve him. I loved you, Edmund. I know you won't believe that after everything that happened, but it's true. What I felt for Scott was infatuation, manipulation, delusion. What I felt for you was real love, the kind that lasts a lifetime. I just lost sight of it when I needed it most. Please find it in your heart to forgive our son. He's paid enough for his mistakes. Goodbye, Renee. Edmund set the letter down and stared out at the city skyline. Renee was dead, his wife of 20 years, the mother of his child, the woman who'd betrayed him so completely, was gone forever. And somewhere in the city below, his son was living on the streets, broken and alone. Carlos knocked on the office door and entered cautiously. Boss, everything okay? Edmund handed him the letter. Renee's dead. Suicide. Carlos read the letter, his expression growing more troubled with each paragraph. Jesus, boss. I'm sorry. She's asking me to forgive Troy. What are you going to do? Edmund was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to do what I've always done, Carlos. I'm going to survive. I'm going to build. I'm going to prosper. And I'm going to prove that betrayal has consequences that can't be erased by guilt or regret or even death. And Troy. Edmund's voice was cold as winter steel. Troy made his choice. Renee made hers. They both chose to trust a con man over their own family. They both chose to destroy everything I'd built for them. The fact that they regretted those choices doesn't change what they did. Carlos nodded slowly. So we continue as planned. We continue as planned. The empire keeps growing, the company keeps expanding, and the people who've earned my trust keep being rewarded for their loyalty. What about the letter? What about Troy being homeless? Edmund walked to his shredder and fed Renee's letter into it, watching as her final words were cut into ribbons. What about it? He's an adult who made adult choices. If he's suffering the consequences of those choices, that's justice, not tragedy. As the last pieces of the letter disappeared, Edmund felt a sense of finality. Renee was dead, Troy was lost, and the family he'd spent decades building was gone forever. But Edmund Weston remained, stronger and more successful than ever. He'd learned the most important lesson of his life. Blood meant nothing compared to loyalty, and family was something you built rather than something you inherited. The empire he'd created would outlast him, carried forward by people who'd proven their worth through dedication and trust rather than genetics and promises. And when Edmund Weston finally left this world, his legacy would be secure in hands that had earned the right to hold it. That was a victory worth more than forgiveness, more than reconciliation, more than the love of people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with it. Edmund Weston had won the only war that truly mattered, the war for his own soul, and he would never surrender it again. As they shook hands, Edmund felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. The future might be different from what he'd planned, but it would be built on a foundation of proven loyalty rather than assumed family bonds. The phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another message from Troy. Edmund blocked it without reading and turned off his phone. The past was finished. It was time to build the future. Chapter 9. Empire Rebuilt. 2 years later, Edmund stood on the observation deck of the newly completed Weston Tower, a 40-story monument to his resilience and success. The building had risen from a downtown Detroit lot that had been empty for decades, its steel and glass reaching toward the sky like a middle finger to everyone who'd thought his downfall was permanent. The expansion into Florida and Texas had exceeded all expectations. Weston Construction now employed over 2,000 people across 3 states, with annual revenues approaching 9 figures. But more importantly, it was staffed entirely by people Edmund trusted, people who'd proven their loyalty through actions rather than words. Carlos Webb stood beside him, no longer just a foreman, but executive vice president of operations. The Houston project is ahead of schedule, and the Miami contract just came through. We're looking at another record quarter. Good. What about the Detroit City Council contracts? All approved. Mayor's singing your praises after the riverfront renovation. Says you've done more for downtown development than any other contractor in the past decade. Edmund nodded, satisfied. The riverfront project had been a gift to the city, a billion-dollar development that provided affordable housing alongside luxury condos, all designed to revitalize the neighborhoods where Edmund had grown up. It was his way of giving back to the community that had shaped him, while simultaneously proving that his empire was stronger than ever. Any word from the federal prosecutors about Scott's appeal? Denied. He's serving his full 25 years, no possibility of parole for at least 15. Turns out the judge didn't appreciate learning about his other victims during sentencing. Edmund smiled coldly. Scott Dawson had gone from thinking he was about to score millions to spending the next 2 decades in federal prison. The man who'd thought he could destroy Edmund Weston had instead become a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating your mark. What about Troy's situation? Carlos's expression grew uncomfortable. He was released 6 months ago, served 18 months, got out early for good behavior and cooperation with other federal cases. And he's been trying to contact you. Letters, phone calls, showing up at job sites. The security team's been turning him away, but he's persistent. Edmund's jaw tightened. I made my position clear. Has he violated the restraining order? No, he stayed the required distance. But boss, the kid looks rough. Real rough. Prison wasn't kind to him, and he can't find work anywhere. The felony conviction has closed a lot of doors. That's not my problem. I know, but Carlos. Edmund's voice carried a warning. We've been through this. Troy made his choice. He chose to betray his family for a con man's lies. The consequences of that choice are his to bear. Carlos nodded reluctantly. Understood, boss. Edmund's phone buzzed with a text from his personal assistant. Renee Marshall requesting meeting. Says it's urgent. Edmund showed Carlos the message. Renee's been trying to contact me too. 3rd time this month. What does she want? Probably money. The $50,000 I gave her wouldn't have lasted long, and she's not exactly equipped for the real world. You gonna see her? No point. We have nothing to discuss. But even as Edmund said it, he felt a flicker of curiosity. Renee had honored the non-disclosure agreement for 2 years, never speaking publicly about their marriage or the circumstances of their divorce. For her to be reaching out now suggested something had changed. His phone rang. Detective Adrian Dunn's name appeared on the screen. Adrian, what can I do for you? Edmund, I need to give you a heads up about something. Renee Marshall was found dead in her apartment